The first day out, Old Valyria chased them with its breath. The sea beneath the hull hissed and spat as if angry that would dared to cross it. Heat rose in waves that made the air shimmer and bend. The sail went slack once, not for lack of wind but because the wind itself felt thick, laden with moisture turned to scalding vapor. Men kept their faces wrapped. Even so, coughs racked the deck, dry and desperate, and the taste of sulfur crept into mouths until water tasted like metal. Jon Snow stayed at the prow. He told himself it was vigilance, but it was also compulsion, an insistence to watch the ruined coast fall away until it became a bruise on the horizon and then nothing at all. The farther they sailed, the lighter his chest felt, and that lightness frightened him. Old Valyria had held him like a fist. Freedom felt like standing on a cliff edge with no wall behind. Nyrax crouched beside him, claws sunk into the prow's timber. The dragon's head swung back and forth, tasting the air, nostrils flaring at each new scent. Every so often Nyrax let out a low sound, deep for a creature still growing, as if answering something only Nyrax could hear. Smoke curled from its nostrils in lazy threads that drifted over the water and vanished. Alex Vassar came to stand behind Jon Snow, one hand on the rail, the other loose near the Valyrian steel dagger at Jon Snow's hip as if the blade belonged to Alex Vassar by right of worry. "You look like you expect the ruins to stand up and walk after us," Alex Vassar said. Jon Snow did not look back. "I expect it to punish us," Jon Snow replied. Alex Vassar's breath was steady. "It already has," Alex Vassar said, "and it will again if you let it keep its claws in you." Jon Snow felt the burn mark on his palm throb faintly, a pulse that matched the ship's creaks. "It's not only in my skin," Jon Snow said. "It's in the sea, in the air." Jon Snow glanced at the distant line of broken coast. Red lightning cracked above it, striking the same point over and over, a hammer insisting on a nail. "It doesn't want to be left." Rena Sorin approached with a cloth pressed tight over her mouth and nose. Her eyes were red-rimmed from wind and ash. "The hull's holding," Rena Sorin said, voice muffled. "Mela Corval's oil mixture is working. For now." "For now," Alex Vassar echoed, as if the words were a prayer and a warning in the same breath. Jon Snow's gaze slid to the men at the oars and ropes. They were the ones who had chosen to come. Tired faces, scarred hands, the kind of people who had learned to keep living even when the world tried to scrape them off. Some avoided looking at Nyrax. Some stared too openly, hunger in their eyes, as if measuring how much protection one dragon could buy them. A sudden shudder ran through the ship. A wave slapped the hull. Not a normal wave, but a surge of water so hot it steamed as it rose, dropping back in a hiss that made men flinch. The timber groaned. Someone swore. Nyrax lifted its head and opened its mouth. The air around its teeth brightened, a faint shimmer. "Not yet," Jon Snow murmured, and placed the burned palm lightly on Nyrax's neck. The scales were hot, but the contact steadied something in Jon Snow as much as it steadied Nyrax. The dragon's mouth closed. Smoke spilled instead. Rena Sorin watched Jon Snow's hand on Nyrax's neck, and something tightened in Rena Sorin's gaze. Admiration tangled with fear. "Volantis will see that," Rena Sorin said quietly. "They'll see you touch a dragon like it's a hound. They'll either worship you or kill you." Jon Snow swallowed. "Then I make the choice for them," Jon Snow said. Alex Vassar's voice dropped. "You speak like Daenor Belowdecks," Alex Vassar warned. Jon Snow looked at Alex Vassar then, and the wind dragged ash across Jon Snow's eyelashes like gray snow. "Daenor Belowdecks would rebuild a grave and call it a palace," Jon Snow said. "Jon Snow will build something that lasts." Jon Snow gestured toward the unseen world ahead. "Not by hiding. Not by begging." Alex Vassar studied Jon Snow for a long moment, as if weighing a blade. "And what if the world refuses your building?" Alex Vassar asked. "What if it only understands burning?" Jon Snow's answer was quiet, almost gentle. "Then Jon Snow teaches it," Jon Snow said. "With fire, if that's the language it speaks." Behind them, Old Valyria crackled with distant lightning, a red wound in the sky. Ahead, the sea's steam thinned. Barely, but enough that the air tasted less like poison. The ship creaked forward, away from the ruins' reach, and Jon Snow felt Nyrax's heat against Jon Snow's leg like a living vow. Night on that sea was not darkness. It was a bruise. The sky turned the color of old blood, and the stars looked dim, as if ashamed to show themselves above cursed waters. The ship's lanterns burned low, their light swallowed quickly by mist. Men spoke in whispers or not at all. The oars dipped with a slow, steady rhythm, each creak of wood sounding too loud. Jon Snow went below with Rhaena Soren when the air above turned sharp and sweet in the wrong way. Gas venting somewhere distant, invisible, carrying a scent that made thoughts swim. Alex Vassar followed, standing at the ladder with one hand on the rail, eyes scanning the dark deck above like a wolf guarding a den. In the hold, the air was warmer, thick with tar and oil and the animal heat of eggs. The remaining dragon eggs rested in a cradle of ash inside a reinforced crate. The pale blue veined egg, the red gold egg from the old pit, and the smaller red gold egg from the coffer. 3 sleeping threats, 3 sleeping promises. Rhaena Soren knelt beside them and unwrapped the green glass candle. The candle's light poured into the hold without flame, turning the timber walls sea green and making shadows behave like living things. When the glow touched the eggshells, the veins seemed to shift, faint lines pulsing as if listening. Jon Snow crouched beside Rhaena Soren. The green light painted Jon Snow's cheekbones sharp, made Jon Snow's eyes look darker. Rhaena Soren shouldn't use that, Jon Snow said softly. The words sounded like concern and command both. Rhaena Soren's jaw tightened. Jon Snow needs it, Rhaena Soren replied. The smoking sea is a maze. The wind lies, the stars lie, the candle shows the clean paths. And what does the candle want in return? Jon Snow asked. Rhaena Soren's fingers tightened around the glass. Sometimes it shows things that aren't there, Rhaena Soren said. Sometimes it shows things that are there but shouldn't be seen. Rhaena Soren swallowed, then lifted the candle slightly, and the green light deepened. The timber wall opposite them flickered, not with flame, but with images that slid over the wood like oil. For a heartbeat, Jon Snow saw a city. Walls black as night, towering and smooth, gates like jaws. Beyond the walls, a river wide as an ocean, crowded with ships. Statues rose along the banks. Stone elephants, stone tigers, stone dragons with broken faces. Volantis. Jon Snow felt breath catch. The image shifted. A massive plaza appeared, crowded with bodies. Slaves in chains, free men in bright cloth, soldiers in striped cloaks. 3 figures stood above them on a balcony behind carved stone. Men in rich robes with hair pale and eyes sharp. Triarchs, Jon Snow knew without knowing how. Then the image twisted again, and the balcony became a field of snow. White falling thick, muffling sound. Jon Snow felt the cold rush through Jon Snow's chest like a knife, the old dream returning with sudden violence. In the snow, a dark shape moved, tall, silent, watching with eyes like blue fire. Jon Snow jerked back, knocking shoulder against a barrel. The green light wavered. The image vanished. Alex Vassar's voice came down from the ladder, low and steady. What did the candle show? Alex Vassar asked. Jon Snow's throat was tight. Volantis, Jon Snow said. And Jon Snow stopped. The rest felt like confessing weakness. Rhaena Soren's eyes were wide. It showed winter, Rhaena Soren whispered. It always circles back to winter when it touches Jon Snow. Jon Snow stared at the eggs, at the faint pulse of veins beneath shell. Nyrax had changed Jon Snow's dreams. Yet something colder than Old Valyria still waited in Jon Snow's blood like a buried shard. Alex Vassar descended 1 step, enough that lantern light caught Alex Vassar's face. Do not let visions make you soft, Alex Vassar said, or reckless. Jon Snow's mouth tightened. Jon Snow is not afraid of a dream, Jon Snow lied. Rhaena Soren's gaze lowered to Jon Snow's burned palm. The mark burns when the candle glows, Rhaena Soren said quietly. It's like the two recognize each other. Jon Snow flexed Jon Snow's fingers. Pain flared faintly, as if agreeing. Then Jon Snow uses it, Jon Snow said, until it kills Jon Snow, or until Jon Snow gets what Jon Snow needs. Aelix Vassar's eyes narrowed. That is how men speak when they have decided they are larger than consequences, Aelix Vassar warned. Jon Snow looked up at Aelix Vassar, green light cutting across Jon Snow's face. Consequences already own Jon Snow, Jon Snow said. They just haven't collected yet. Rena Soren wrapped the candle again, smothering its glow. Darkness rushed back into the hold, thick and ordinary by comparison. The eggs sat silent, heavy with potential. Above, the ship creaked as it pushed through cursed water. Somewhere out on the sea, something cried. A sound like a distant animal, or a stone dragged across stone. Jon Snow climbed back to the deck with the taste of green light still behind Jon Snow's eyes and the memory of snow still cold in Jon Snow's ribs. On the third day, the sea tried to swallow them whole. It began with a sudden silence. No hiss, no crackle, no groan of timber. Just a breathless pause that made every man look up as if the world had stopped turning. The steam thinned, revealing the water's surface briefly, glassy and wrong. Jon Snow felt Nyrax stiffen. The dragon's claws dug into the mast. Then the wave came. It rose like a wall, not blue or green but gray-white with heat, steaming as it climbed. Men shouted, or snapped. The ship pitched. For an instant Jon Snow saw the hollow beneath the wave. A dark trough where something moved, long, thick, serpentine, sliding through water with purpose. The wave slammed into the hull and the deck vanished under scalding spray. Hot water burned exposed skin. Men screamed, slapping at themselves. A coil of rope snapped loose and whipped across the deck, striking one man's cheek hard enough to split flesh. He fell, blood and salt mixing in a thin line. Aelix Vassar grabbed him by the collar and hauled him back from the rail before the ship's next lurch tossed him into the sea. "Hold!" Aelix Vassar roared, voice cutting through chaos. "Hold your footing!" Jon Snow staggered, boots slipping on wet timber. Jon Snow caught the rail, fingers closing around it with painful strength. The burn mark on Jon Snow's palm flared, reacting to heat and danger alike. Nyrax shrieked, an angry sound, and beat its wings, trying to lift, but steam and wind battered it back. "Nyrax!" Jon Snow shouted. Jon Snow did not know if the dragon understood words. Jon Snow only knew Nyrax understood will. Jon Snow pushed Jon Snow's will outward like a shove. Up! Nyrax launched from the mast, wings snapping open, and for a heartbeat Nyrax hovered over the deck, steam curling around Nyrax's body like ghosts. Then Nyrax climbed, cutting through the mist, and the shadow beneath the water shifted as if tracking Nyrax instead of the ship. The serpent, if it was a serpent, rose. A head broke the surface, slick and pale, too smooth. It was not a sea dragon. It was something else, mouth wide, ringed with teeth that looked soft until they opened and revealed thin barbs like bone needles. It lunged toward the hull, aiming for the oars and the men who clung there. "Fire!" Jon Snow shouted, and the order felt obscene on water. Nyrax answered. Flame poured from Nyrax's mouth, bright and fierce, cutting through steam in a blazing arc. The fire struck the creature's head, and the smell that rose was not fish or salt. It was the smell of burning fat and rotten eggs. The creature screamed, a sound that was part animal, part grinding stone, and recoiled, thrashing. Its tail slammed the hull, making the ship shudder. Men shouted prayers. Some shouted Jon Snow's name. Others shouted Daenor Belowdecks, as if the old Dragon Lord's shadow still mattered. The wave's backwash rolled across the deck, and a sailor near the stern slipped, sliding toward the rail. Aelix Vassar lunged, grabbing the sailor's wrist, but the sailor's fingers were slick with burned skin. The grip failed. The sailor fell, arms flailing, and hit the water with a hiss that made Jon Snow's stomach twist. The sea was hot enough that even the splash sounded like meat meeting pan. The sailor screamed once. Then the scream choked into silence as steam swallowed the body. Jon Snow felt something in Jon Snow's chest fracture. Not pity, not grief, but the hardening realization that conquest began here, not in cities with walls, but on a deck where men died before the war even started. Jon Snow clenched Jon Snow's jaw until teeth ached. Nyrax dove again, breathing flame in short bursts, driving the creature away. The creature submerged, leaving only a churn of boiling water and a spreading slick that steamed. The ship rocked in the creature's wake, then steadied gradually, creaking like an old beast settling after a kick. Men lay panting, some burned, some bleeding, all shaking. Alex Vassar wiped water from Alex Vassar's face, eyes scanning the sea as if expecting the creature to return. Old Valyria sends its pets, Alex Vassar muttered. Jon Snow stared at the steam, at the place where the sailor had vanished. Old Valyria sends warnings, Jon Snow said. Rhaena Soren approached, face pale, hands shaking despite effort. How many more of those are there? Rhaena Soren asked. Jon Snow did not answer, because Jon Snow did not know. Jon Snow only knew Nyrax hovered above them, smoke trailing, wings beating, and the dragon's presence felt like the only reason the sea had not eaten them entirely. When the wind finally caught the sail again, it carried with it a new scent. Less sulfur, more river, more rot and vegetation. The world ahead was changing. The cursed sea's grip loosened, reluctantly, and Jon Snow understood Old Valyria had allowed them to leave, but not for free. It had taken a life as payment, and it would demand more. It was not the sea alone that hunted them. On the fifth night, when the steam had finally thinned enough that the stars looked sharper and the air tasted more like ordinary salt, Jon Snow woke with Nyrax's claws digging into Jon Snow's chest. The dragon's body was tense, vibrating with quiet fury. Nyrax did not sleep deeply. Nyrax slept like a predator, always listening. Jon Snow lay still, breathing slow, and listened too. A faint sound came from below. Wood creaking under careful weight, the soft scrape of metal against metal. Jon Snow slid off the sleeping mat and moved across the deck without waking the others. The ship rocked gently now, river currents tugging at it, a different motion from the boiling sea. The smell of green land drifted in from somewhere unseen. Wet reeds, mud, rot. They were nearing the Rhoyne's mouth. Jon Snow reached the ladder to the hold and paused, hand tightening around the Valyrian steel dagger. The blade's coolness steadied Jon Snow, a shard of winter against the lingering heat in Jon Snow's blood. Nyrax followed, silent, wings folding tight. Jon Snow descended. In the hold, lantern light revealed the intruder, Corro Valen, one of the men who had insisted on coming, a broad-shouldered survivor with a scar down his cheek. Corro Valen had spoken little since boarding. Corro Valen had watched too much. Now Corro Valen knelt at the egg crate, chisel in hand, prying at the reinforced lid. Sweat gleamed on Corro Valen's forehead. Corro Valen's eyes were wild with focus and fear. Jon Snow's voice cut through the hold like a snapped chain. "Stop!" Corro Valen jerked, spinning. For a heartbeat, Corro Valen stared at Jon Snow as if deciding whether to fight or plead. Then Corro Valen lunged. Not at Jon Snow, but at the crate, hands reaching to snatch what lay inside. Rhaena Soren appeared from the shadows, faster than Jon Snow expected. Rhaena Soren grabbed Corro Valen's wrist and twisted hard. Corro Valen grunted, chisel clattering to the floor. "Rhaena Soren," Corro Valen began, voice strained. "Listen." Alex Vassar descended behind Jon Snow, blocking the ladder as if sealing the room. Alex Vassar's face was carved from calm. "Corro Valen," Alex Vassar said. "Explain." Corro Valen's breath came fast. "Daenor Belowdecks promised," Corro Valen blurted. Daenor Belowdecks said, if Corro Valen brought an egg back, Daenor Belowdecks would make Corro Valen lord of the new city when Daenor Belowdecks returned. Daenor Belowdecks said Jon Snow would die in Volantis. Daenor Belowdecks said it was only a matter of time. Corro Valen's eyes flicked to Nyrax above, and Corro Valen swallowed hard. Daenor Belowdecks said Nyrax would burn Jon Snow the moment Nyrax grew. Rhaena Sorin's grip tightened until Coro Valen winced. Daenor Belloris used you, Rhaena Sorin hissed. Coro Valen's voice broke. Coro Valen wanted to live, Coro Valen whispered. Coro Valen wanted to belong to something that isn't ash. Jon Snow stared at Coro Valen. Jon Snow felt the old anger rise, hot, immediate, the kind that wanted simple solutions. Kill the traitor. Throw the body into the river. Be done. Nyrax shifted overhead, smoke thickening, and Jon Snow knew Nyrax would do it happily if Jon Snow allowed. Alex Vassar spoke quietly, almost kindly. How many? Alex Vassar asked. How many did Daenor Belloris send? Coro Valen's eyes darted. Coro Valen hesitated too long. Rhaena Sorin pressed the dagger at Coro Valen's belt closer to Coro Valen's skin. Answer. Coro Valen's throat worked. 2, Coro Valen said. Coro Valen and... A second figure moved in the darkness near the barrels, and Jon Snow felt rather than saw it, weight-shifting, breath-catching. Jon Snow turned, dagger up. A man stepped into lantern light with hands raised. Lighter build, younger, eyes too bright. Jon Snow recognized him. Sallow Corrin, the one who had laughed too loudly at Daenor Belloris' speeches and then fallen silent when Jon Snow spoke of leaving. Sallow Corrin's lips trembled. Jon Snow, Sallow Corrin whispered. Sallow Corrin didn't want. Nyrax dropped from the beams with a thud, landing between Jon Snow and Sallow Corrin. The dragon's wings flared, filling the hold with shadow. Amber eyes locked on Sallow Corrin, unblinking. Smoke poured from Nyrax's nostrils in thick ropes that curled around Sallow Corrin's ankles. Sallow Corrin froze, trembling. Jon Snow looked from Coro Valen to Sallow Corrin and felt something in Jon Snow harden. This was the Freehold's first lesson, delivered before Jon Snow ever reached a city. Power drew betrayal the way blood drew flies. Alex Vassar's voice was low. What will you do? Alex Vassar asked Jon Snow. Not judgment. A test. Rhaena Sorin's eyes were fierce. If Jon Snow lets them live, they'll try again, Rhaena Sorin said. Or someone else will. Coro Valen's face crumpled. Please, Coro Valen whispered. Jon Snow's burned palm pulsed as if remembering the cold vision, the blue-eyed shape in snow. Mercy had not kept men alive in Valyria. Mercy had been a word people spoke right before they died. Jon Snow stepped closer to Coro Valen until the lantern light showed every pore, every bead of sweat. Coro Valen wanted to belong, Jon Snow said quietly. So Coro Valen chose Daenor Belloris. Coro Valen chose a man who would rebuild a grave. Coro Valen sobbed once, sound harsh. Jon Snow lifted the Valyrian steel dagger. The blade caught lantern light and looked almost blue. Then Jon Snow turned the dagger and cut the rope coil beside the egg crate. Not the eggs. The rope. Jon Snow's movements were precise, controlled. Jon Snow pointed the dagger at Coro Valen. Coro Valen will live, Jon Snow said. Rhaena Sorin stared. Alex Vassar's face did not change, but something in Alex Vassar's eyes sharpened. Coro Valen's breath hitched with relief so strong it looked like pain. Jon Snow's voice ain't flat. Coro Valen will live as a warning, Jon Snow continued. Sallow Corrin will live as a warning. Jon Snow gestured toward the ladder. They will go above. They will stand before everyone. Jon Snow will tell everyone exactly what Daenor Belloris offered, and exactly what it bought. Jon Snow's gaze cut through Coro Valen. And Coro Valen will be the first to row when the river turns hard. Coro Valen will be the first to climb the walls if Jon Snow orders it. If Coro Valen refuses, Nyrax will eat Coro Valen's heart while Coro Valen still breathes. Nyrax hissed softly, as if savoring the thought. Coro Valen nodded frantically. Yes, Coro Valen gasped. Yes, anything. Alex Vassar exhaled once. Slow. Clever, Alex Vassar murmured. And it was neither praise nor condemnation, only recognition. Rhaena Sorin's eyes stayed on Jon Snow, and Jon Snow saw the question there. How many warnings before warning became cruelty? How many mercies before mercy became weakness? Jon Snow did not answer that question. Jon Snow climbed back to the deck with Corro Valen and Sallow Corrin in front, Nyrax following like a shadow. The night air hit Jon Snow's face, cold compared to Valyria's heat, and Jon Snow tasted reeds and mud and distant smoke from civilization. Volantis was close enough now that betrayal had already started to wear a human face. The river changed the sound of the world. The Rhoyne did not hiss the way the smoking sea did. It breathed. It moved with weight and patience, brown-green water rolling around reed beds and mud banks, carrying driftwood, carrying dead fish, carrying things Jon Snow did not name. The air was cooler here, and the coolness felt like a new kind of danger, less obvious, more insinuating. At dawn, fog clung low over the delta, turning everything into pale shapes. The ship glided forward with oars dipping quietly. Men's shoulders eased. They had survived the cursed sea. Now they entered a realm where death wore human clothing. Jon Snow stepped onto a mud bank briefly with Alex Vassar and Rena Sorin to survey. The mud sucked at boots. The reeds whispered. In the muck, Jon Snow saw iron. A length of chain half buried, links corroded but unmistakable. A broken or lay beside it, splintered. The river had a way of keeping history and spitting it up at random. Rena Sorin pointed through fog. There, Rena Sorin said. Jon Snow followed the line of Rena Sorin's finger and saw, on the horizon, a shape that made Jon Snow's gut tighten even from this distance. Black walls rising like a cliff, smooth and severe. The black walls of Volantis. Even in fog, they looked absolute, as if carved from night itself. Alex Vassar unfolded a weathered map on a flat stone, holding corners down against damp wind. The map was crude compared to Valyria's old charts, but it showed the river's mouth, the approaches, the patrol routes marked with charcoal. Volantis watches its river like a hawk watches a rabbit, Alex Vassar said. There will be patrol galleys. There will be tariffs. There will be men who look at this hull and smell the smoking sea and decide we're either treasure hunters or plague. Both are killed, Rena Sorin said. Jon Snow stared at the distant walls until the fog made them blur, then sharpen again. Volantis wants Valyria back, Jon Snow said quietly. Volantis pretends it is Valyria's heir. Volantis will recognize Nyrax. Alex Vassar's gaze flicked to Nyrax. The dragon perched on a low branch, wings tucked, amber eyes scanning reeds as if expecting a hidden beast to leap out. Steam rose faintly from Nyrax's scales in the cooler air, making Nyrax look like a living ember. A dragon is not subtle, Alex Vassar said. Jon Snow's mouth tightened. Jon Snow is not coming to Volantis to be subtle, Jon Snow replied. Jon Snow is coming to be undeniable. Rena Sorin's expression tightened. Undeniable gets arrows, Rena Sorin warned. Undeniable gets nets. Undeniable gets poison. Jon Snow looked down at the chain half buried in mud. Volantis builds its peace on iron, Jon Snow said. Jon Snow will show Volantis a stronger metal. They returned to the ship. The crew watched Jon Snow's face, looking for assurance. Jon Snow gave them none. Assurance was another luxury. By midday, they saw the first sign of Volantis's reach. A barge heavy with grain moving upriver, oars manned by chained rowers with bare backs striped red. A whip cracked. A free man sat beneath a canopy, fat and bored, not looking at the rowers as if they were furniture. Nyrax hissed softly at the sight, smoke curling. Rena Sorin's voice was tight. That's the world, Rena Sorin said. Not ash, not ruins, just men using other men. Jon Snow watched the whip rise and fall. Something cold and hard settled deeper in Jon Snow. Then Jon Snow breaks that, Jon Snow said. Not out of kindness alone, but because chains were leverage and leverage was power. Alex Vassar looked at Jon Snow sharply. Be careful, Alex Vassar said. You can't rebuild a freehold with ideals alone. Jon Snow did not look away from the barge. Jon Snow is not bringing ideals, Jon Snow said. Jon Snow is bringing a new law. Jon Snow touched the leather pouch at Jon Snow's belt where the scrolls were wrapped, and a dragon to enforce it. As they pushed onward, fog lifted and the river widened. The black walls grew clearer, higher, more imposing. Towers rose behind them. Smoke curled from countless hearths. The sound of the city reached them, a distant roar like the sea, but made by voices instead of water. Volantis waited ahead, fat and confident, unaware that the first crack in its old order was already gliding up its river on a battered ship that smelled of ash. The patrol found them before the city did. It slid out of the river's haze like a knife, long and lean, painted in Volantis's striped colors. Bronze glinted on its bow. Its oars moved in crisp rhythm, not chained hands but trained ones. A banner snapped above it, a tiger's head, mouth open in perpetual hunger. Jon Snow's ship was smaller, lower, patched. It looked like prey. Men on Jon Snow's deck stiffened. Hands drifted toward knives. Coro Valen and Sallow Corrin sat at the oars under watch, faces tight, rowing as if their lives depended on it, because they did. Alex Vassar moved to Jon Snow's side, eyes on the patrol's deck. "See the scorpions," Alex Vassar murmured. Bolted siege weapons sat near the rail, angled toward Jon Snow's mast. "They are ready." Rena Sorin came up with a chest, breathing hard. When Rena Sorin cracked the lid, silver coins glittered. Salvage from Old Valyria, hammered shapes and foreign mint. "A bribe," Rena Sorin said tightly. "Sometimes it's cheaper to lie." Jon Snow's gaze stayed on the patrol's bow as it drew near. A man stood there in bronze scale armor, cloak striped red and black. His hair was dark, his face sharp, and his eyes assessed everything with the bored confidence of a man used to being obeyed. Captain Sargon Penimian, Jon Snow guessed, because Volantis liked names that sounded like blades. The patrol hailed them in a booming voice. "Identify your vessel. Lower your sail. Prepare to be boarded in the name of Volantis." Jon Snow stepped forward, raising one hand in a gesture of calm. Above, Nyrax clung to the mast, wings tucked, eyes bright. The dragon's presence was a secret only because the mist and the angle hid it. Jon Snow called back in clear Valyrian accented speech. "Jon Snow brings trade," Jon Snow said. "Salt and relics and coin."
Jon Snow paye tarif.
Captain Sargon Penimian's mouth curved slightly. The patrol moved closer, oars churning, scorpions tracking. "Relics," Captain Sargon Penimian said. "From where?" "From the east," Jon Snow answered smoothly. Captain Sargon Penimian's gaze narrowed. "The east is a large place," Captain Sargon Penimian said. Jon Snow's burned palm pulsed. Jon Snow smiled without warmth. "Old stones," Jon Snow said. "Old metal, old stories, enough to make Volantis rich." Captain Sargon Penimian's eyes flicked to the silver chest in Rena Sorin's hands. Hunger flashed, quick. Then suspicion returned. "Volantis does not welcome plague ships," Captain Sargon Penimian said. "Volantis does not welcome treasure hunters who anger old gods." Alex Vassar leaned close. "If Captain Sargon Penimian boards, Captain Sargon Penimian will see the eggs," Alex Vassar murmured. "If Captain Sargon Penimian sees the eggs, Captain Sargon Penimian will take them. Or Captain Sargon Penimian will kill us for them." Jon Snow nodded faintly. Jon Snow had already decided. The bribe was a rope, useful, but only as long as Jon Snow held the other end. Jon Snow raised Jon Snow's voice. "Volantis can inspect," Jon Snow said. "But Volantis will inspect on Jon Snow's deck." Jon Snow lifted the silver chest higher. "Tariff first." Captain Sargon Penimian's gaze hardened. "You dictate terms to Volantis?" Captain Sargon Penimian asked, incredulous. Jon Snow's smile did not move. "Jon Snow offers terms," Jon Snow said. "Volantis can accept them, or Volantis can turn away and let another city take Jon Snow's coin." Captain Sargon Penimian laughed once. Sharp. "There is no other city on this river that matters," Captain Sargon Penimian said. Jon Snow looked up. Nyrax moved. The dragon unfurled its wings slowly, deliberately, like a banner being raised. Steam slid off Nyrax's scales. the amber eyes fixed on Captain Sargon Penimian. Smoke curled thicker from Nyrax's nostrils, and the air around the mast shimmered with heat. The patrol's deck went silent. A scorpion gunner froze mid-crank. Someone whispered a prayer. Captain Sargon Penimian's confident expression cracked, just a sliver, into something rawer. A dragon, someone breathed, and the words spread like flame through dry grass. Captain Sargon Penimian's mouth opened, then closed again. Captain Sargon Penimian's eyes flicked to the scorpions, then to Nyrax, then back to Jon Snow. "That is," Captain Sargon Penimian began, voice suddenly less certain. "That is not possible. Jon Snow was raised where possibilities burn," Jon Snow said softly. Nyrax hissed, and a thin ribbon of flame licked the air above Jon Snow's mast, just enough to make heat touch faces. Men on the patrol flinched back. Captain Sargon Penimian swallowed, visible even at distance. Captain Sargon Penimian's pride wrestled with survival. Pride lost by the smallest margin. Captain Sargon Penimian raised one hand sharply, and the patrol's oars slowed. "Tariff," Captain Sargon Penimian said, voice tight. "Pay and proceed. But Volantis will know of this." Jon Snow inclined Jon Snow's head, as if granting Captain Sargon Penimian mercy. Rhoyne Sorin tossed a pouch of silver onto a small skiff that floated between ships. The patrol's men snatched it like starving dogs. Captain Sargon Penimian's gaze stayed on Nyrax. "The Triarchs will want to see you," Captain Sargon Penimian said. "The old blood will want to know who dares bring Dragonfire to the Rhoyne." Jon Snow's voice was calm, deadly. "Then tell the Triarchs Jon Snow is coming," Jon Snow said. "And tell the Triarchs to decide quickly whether they prefer knees or ash." The patrol galley fell back, giving them space like a man stepping away from a cliff edge. Jon Snow's ship continued upriver, the black walls looming closer, the city's roar growing louder. Behind them, Captain Sargon Penimian watched as if memorizing the shape of doom. Volantis did not greet them with wonder. Volantis greeted them with appetite. As Jon Snow's ship approached the docks, the river widened into a busy throat of commerce. Barges and galleys jostled, sails snapping, oars splashing. The smell hit first: fish, spice, sweat, dung, smoke. Then the noise, shouted orders, crying children, iron chains clanking, bells ringing, drums beating somewhere distant in a rhythm meant to keep rowers synchronized and spirits obedient. The black walls rose on the far side of the harbor like the edge of the world. Smooth and dark, built from fused stone that drank light. The gates were enormous, framed by carved reliefs of dragons and tigers. Above the walls, taller towers climbed, their tops lost in smoke. Jon Snow stood on the deck with hood down, letting the city see Jon Snow's face, letting them see the ash in Jon Snow's hair, the calm in Jon Snow's eyes. Nyrax circled above, not high, not hidden, wings cutting through humid air. The dragon's shadow passed over boats and docks, and heads turned in unison like grass bending under wind. The dock itself was crowded with bodies. Free men in bright robes pressed close to sea, their faces painted with curiosity and calculation. Soldiers in tiger-striped cloaks formed a loose line, hands on spears, eyes sharp. Behind them, further back, closer to warehouses, stood slaves in rows, chained, barebacked, their eyes fixed forward in the dull stare of people trained not to look hopeful. Rhoyne Sorin's hands clenched on the rail. Rhoyne Sorin stared at the slaves as if seeing a mirror of Old Valyria's hunger, only cleaner and more organized. "They built a city on backs," Rhoyne Sorin whispered. Alex Vassar's voice was low. "All cities are built that way," Alex Vassar said. "Volantis just admits it." A group of officials approached, pushing through the crowd. They wore gold-trimmed robes, heavy rings, and carried scroll cases. Their leader was an older man with pale hair dyed almost silver, cheeks smooth with oil. Old blood, Jon Snow thought. A man who wanted to look Valyrian more than he wanted to be honest. "I am Magistrate Valeso Rindoon," the man announced, voice loud. "By authority of the Triarchs of Volantis, You will state your name, your origin, and the purpose of your approach. You carry a dragon. Such things are not permitted without sanction. Jon Snow stepped forward to the very edge of the deck. The air between ship and dock felt like a drawn bowstring. Jon Snow said. Origin, Old Valyria. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed nervously. Someone spat. Magistrate Valeso Rindune's face tightened. Old Valyria is dead, Magistrate Valeso Rindune said sharply. Old Valyria is a curse. No one comes from there alive. Nyrax circled lower and let out a low roar that rolled across the harbor and made birds explode from rooftops. The sound cut through the crowd's murmurs like a blade. Jon Snow did not raise Jon Snow's voice. Jon Snow came, Jon Snow said. Magistrate Valeso Rindune's gaze flicked to Nyrax and then away quickly, as if staring too long might invite fire. Purpose, Magistrate Valeso Rindune demanded, voice less steady. Jon Snow's burn mark pulsed, and Jon Snow felt the words settle into place like stones in a foundation. Purpose, the Freehold, Jon Snow said. Reforged. The officials stiffened. The Tiger-Cloaks shifted, spears angling slightly. The free men in the crowd leaned forward, hungry for scandal, for history. Magistrate Valeso Rindune's mouth worked. Volantis is the heir of Valyria, Magistrate Valeso Rindune said. Volantis honors the blood of the Freehold. Volantis, Jon Snow cut in softly. Volantis honors chains, Jon Snow said. Volantis honors old names while living like a slaver kingdom. Jon Snow's gaze swept the dock, the soldiers, the slaves. Jon Snow brings law. Jon Snow brings Dragonfire to enforce law. Jon Snow comes to offer Volantis the chance to kneel first. A murmur rippled into shouted outrage. A Tiger-Cloak captain barked an order, and spears lifted higher. Magistrate Valeso Rindune's face turned blotchy with anger and fear. You threaten Volantis on its own river? Magistrate Valeso Rindune spat. Jon Snow's eyes did not blink. Jon Snow announces Volantis's choice, Jon Snow said. Alex Vassar leaned close, voice barely audible. You're pressing too hard, Alex Vassar warned. You haven't even stepped on their stone yet. Jon Snow's mouth tightened. If Jon Snow steps gently, Volantis will step on Jon Snow, Jon Snow murmured back. Magistrate Valeso Rindune lifted a scroll case like a weapon. You will come to the Black Walls, Magistrate Valeso Rindune said. You will present yourself to the Triarchs under guard. You will not fly that beast over Volantis. You will not. Nyrax's shadow passed over Magistrate Valeso Rindune's face. The magistrate flinched. Jon Snow nodded once, as if granting permission. Jon Snow will come, Jon Snow said. Jon Snow will bring Nyrax. A collective inhale swept the dock. Even Tiger-Cloaks looked uncertain at the idea of a dragon within the Black Walls. Magistrate Valeso Rindune's eyes widened slightly, then hardened into forced authority. Then follow? Magistrate Valeso Rindune said, and turned sharply, as if motion could substitute for confidence. Jon Snow stepped onto the dock. The stone beneath Jon Snow's boots was warm from sun and bodies. It felt like the first true ground of a new world. Jon Snow could feel thousands of eyes on Jon Snow's back. Some hateful, some worshipful, some calculating which side to stand on once the fire started. Nyrax landed on a warehouse roof with a heavy thud, claws cracking clay tiles. The dragon's head swung, tasting the city's air, and smoke curled from Nyrax's nostrils as if Volantis itself was already kindling. Rena Soren and Alex Vassar followed Jon Snow into the crowd's parted path. Behind them, slaves watched with eyes that had forgotten hope and were forced to remember it anyway, painfully, like a limb waking from numbness. Jon Snow walked toward the Black Walls, and the city's roar seemed to hush in anticipation, as if Volantis understood that something ancient had returned, not as memory, but as judgment. The Black Walls made men smaller. Up close, the stone did not look like ordinary stone. It was too smooth, too dark, as if it had once been liquid and then hardened into perfection. Carvings of dragons coiled along the gate pillars, their mouths open, their eyes hollow. The heat trapped in the wall's belly radiated outward, making the air shimmer faintly. Jon Snow's burn mark pulsed like a second heartbeat. Tiger-Cloaks formed a ring around Jon Snow, spears angled outward, keeping the crowd back. Their faces were hard, trained to intimidation. Yet their eyes kept flicking upward, tracking Nyrax as the dragon crawled along the wall's stone with claws that found purchase where no claw should. Nyrax moved like a lizard made of fire, wings folded tight, body hugging the wall as if claiming it. A scorpion crew on the parapet scrambled, hauling the weapon into position, bolts rattling. Their hands shook. Their captain barked orders that sounded thin against the dragon's presence. The scorpion's aim wavered. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon moved ahead, trying to project authority. "Keep the beast down," Magistrate Valeso Rindoon snapped at Jon Snow. "If it flies, we will fire." "You will miss," Jon Snow said quietly. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon flushed. "We will try," Magistrate Valeso Rindoon hissed. A commotion rose near the edge of the cordon. A slave child, too small for chains thick enough for an adult, stumbled under a load of sacks, tripping into the Tiger-Cloak's ring. A Tiger-Cloak shoved the child back with the butt of a spear. The child fell hard, sacks spilling grain. The child's face was streaked with dirt and tears, eyes wide with panic. Rena Soren took a step, anger flashing. "Stop," Rena Soren began. The Tiger-Cloak raised the spear again, not to kill, perhaps, but to remind. The child flinched, arms up. Something in Jon Snow snapped. Not loudly, not theatrically, but cleanly, like a rope cut. Jon Snow raised the burned palm. Nyrax reacted instantly, as if the gesture were a bell rung. The dragon's head whipped toward the parapet, amber eyes blazing. Nyrax opened its mouth. Flame poured out, but not toward the child, not toward the crowd. Nyrax's fire traced along the scorpion's wooden frame in a single controlled ribbon, licking over the weapon like a painter's brush. The wood blackened and cracked. The rope lines caught and snapped. The iron fittings glowed dull red. The crew screamed and leapt back, hands flailing. The scorpion sagged, ruined, without a bolt ever loosed. The crowd went silent. The Tiger-Cloaks froze, spears half raised, faces pale beneath disciplined hardness. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon stared up at the smoking scorpion, mouth open. Jon Snow stepped toward the child and bent, picking up one fallen sack and setting it upright with calm care. Jon Snow's hands did not tremble. Jon Snow looked at the Tiger-Cloak who had shoved the child. "Volantis will not strike children in Jon Snow's presence," Jon Snow said, voice low. The Tiger-Cloak's jaw worked. The Tiger-Cloak glanced toward the parapet, toward the ruined weapon, then back at Jon Snow. Pride fought survival and lost quickly. The Tiger-Cloak lowered the spear a fraction. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon recovered enough to sputter. You just attacked Volantene arms," Magistrate Valeso Rindoon cried. "You!" Jon Snow looked at Magistrate Valeso Rindoon. "Jon Snow removed a threat," Jon Snow said. "A threat that made Volantis nervous." Jon Snow's gaze swept the soldiers. "Let Volantis learn now what sanction looks like." Rena Soren's eyes were wide. Alex Vassar watched Jon Snow with an expression that held both caution and grim respect. The slave child stared up at Jon Snow, lips trembling. The child's eyes held something Jon Snow had not seen in Old Valyria's enclave. The raw shock of someone realizing power might be turned toward them instead of against them. Jon Snow reached into Jon Snow's belt pouch and tossed the child a silver coin. The child caught it clumsily, as if expecting it to burn. "Go," Jon Snow said softly. The child scrambled away, clutching the coin like a talisman. Above, Nyrax crawled along the black wall and stopped, perched like a dark crown over the gate. Smoke curled from Nyrax's nostrils, drifting down over Volantis's guards like a blessing and a warning both. The gate creaked open. Inside lay the Old Blood city, sealed away from the river's grime. And Volantis, which had greeted Jon Snow with appetite, now tasted fear. The world inside the black walls smelled different. The noise of the harbor fell away as the gate closed behind them with a sound like a tomb ceiling. Within, Volantis became something else. Cleaner streets, stone paved and swept, fountains murmuring, gardens trimmed into obedience. The air held incense and perfume instead of fish rot. Slaves moved silently in the background, heads bowed, carrying trays and water and messages like living shadows. Free men walked with pride, their robes bright, their jewelry heavy, their eyes sharp and entitled. Jon Snow felt the shift like stepping from ash into silk. It disgusted Jon Snow more than the harbor had. At least the harbor's filth was honest. They led Jon Snow through corridors lined with mosaics depicting Old Valyria. Dragon lords in gilded armor, cities burning beneath them, ships kneeling on seas. The imagery was meant to inspire loyalty. It only reminded Jon Snow what arrogance looked like when it fossilized. At last they entered a hall that was half temple, half court. The ceiling rose high, supported by columns carved with dragons and tigers entwined. Braziers burned with scented fire. At the far end sat 3 figures on a stone dais, framed by draped black cloth like mourning and power intertwined. Triarch Malcolm Mager sat in the center, older, pale-haired, eyes like chips of amethyst. His face held the practiced stillness of a man used to men dying for him. To his right sat Triarch Palar Narealer, younger, lean, with an elegant cruelty in the set of his mouth. To his left sat Triarch Serala Vassal, a woman with silver-dyed hair braided tight, rings on every finger, gaze calculating and cold. They looked Valyrian in the way Volantis wanted to look Valyrian, curated, perfected, performed. Jon Snow stood before them with Aelix Vassar and Rena Soren flanking. Behind Jon Snow, Nyrax lay on the marble floor, wings folded, eyes fixed on the dais. The dragon's presence changed the hall's temperature. Even the braziers seemed smaller by comparison. Triarch Malcolm Mager's voice carried without effort. "You make an entrance, Jon Snow," Triarch Malcolm Mager said. "You burn a scorpion and call it mercy." Jon Snow did not bow. "Jon Snow prevented a mistake," Jon Snow said. Triarch Palar Narealer's mouth curved. "A mistake is anything that disobeys Volantis," Triarch Palar Narealer said. Triarch Serala Vassal leaned forward slightly. "Old Valyria," Triarch Serala Vassal said softly. "Say it again. Volantis likes to hear the lie that flatters." Jon Snow felt the burn mark pulse, a steady insistence. Jon Snow lifted a scroll case. "Jon Snow does not bring flattery," Jon Snow said. "Jon Snow brings law." Triarch Malcolm Mager's eyes narrowed. "Law?" Triarch Malcolm Mager repeated. "Volantis has law." "Volantis has chains," Jon Snow corrected. A murmur ran through the hall. Free men stiffened. Slaves did not react, not openly. But Jon Snow saw small movements. A shoulder tightening, a head tilting as if listening harder. Triarch Palar Narealer's voice sharpened. "Be careful," Triarch Palar Narealer warned. "You stand in the black walls. You stand among the old blood. You stand before the Triarchs." Volantis could. Nyrax lifted its head and let out a low rumble. Not a roar, a reminder. The sound vibrated through marble and silenced the threat mid-sentence. Triarch Malcolm Mager watched Nyrax with interest that was almost reverent. "A dragon," Triarch Malcolm Mager said quietly. "Volantis has prayed for such a sign." Triarch Malcolm Mager's gaze returned to Jon Snow. "Are you a sign? Or a thief?" Jon Snow opened the scroll case and withdrew one brittle parchment. Careful, reverent not for Volantis but for the structure the words represented. Jon Snow stepped forward and held the parchment out. "Its seal is older than your walls," Jon Snow said. "It came from a coffer guarded by a fireworm beneath Valyria's bones. It speaks the Freehold's compact, what Dragonlords swore when they still believed in duty." Triarch Serala Vassal's eyes sharpened, greed flickering. "Give it," Triarch Serala Vassal said. Jon Snow held it a moment longer, forcing them to feel the denial. Then Jon Snow placed it on a bronze tray held by a trembling slave who moved forward as if afraid the parchment might bite. Triarch Malco-Maegor read quickly, eyes moving with practiced speed. Triarch Palar Narealar leaned in. Triarch Serala Vassal's fingers hovered, itching to touch. As Triarch Malco-Maegor read, Triarch Malco-Maegor's expression changed. Subtly, but Jon Snow noticed. It was the look of a man seeing a weapon offered and realizing it could cut both ways. "These are obligations," Triarch Malco-Maegor said slowly. "Taxes, roads, governors, limits on dragon lords." Triarch Malco-Maegor looked up. "This is not the Valyria Volantis teaches its children to worship. That Valyria was a story told by men who wanted power without restraint," Jon Snow said. "Jon Snow brings the restraint. Jon Snow brings the structure." Jon Snow's gaze held the Triarchs. "Volantis can be the first pillar of the new Freehold." Triarch Palar Narealar laughed softly. "A new Freehold?" Triarch Palar Narealar said. "Under Jon Snow?" "Under law," Jon Snow said. Triarch Serala Vassal's voice was silky. "And who enforces your law?" Triarch Serala Vassal asked, though Triarch Serala Vassal's eyes flicked to Nyrax as if Triarch Serala Vassal already knew. Jon Snow did not smile. "Nyrax enforces it," Jon Snow said, "and the eggs Jon Snow carries, and the fleets Jon Snow will build." Jon Snow leaned forward slightly. "Volantis thinks itself heir. Prove it. Kneel willingly, and Volantis keeps its wealth, its walls, its dignity. Refuse, and Jon Snow will take Volantis anyway and strip the old blood from its false crown." A heavy silence fell. The hall's braziers crackled. Somewhere distant, a fountain murmured. Triarch Malco-Maegor's eyes did not blink. "You ask Volantis to Surin,"
Der Triarch Malco-Maegor said.
Jon Snow's voice was calm. "Jon Snow offers Volantis a place beside Jon Snow instead of beneath Jon Snow's boot," Jon Snow replied. Aelix Vassar shifted slightly, as if feeling the room's tension like a storm's pressure. Rena Sorin's jaw was tight, eyes darting to exits, counting guards. Triarch Palar Narealar's gaze sharpened with hatred. "Volantis is not ruled by fear," Triarch Palar Narealar said. Nyrax's tail flicked. Marble scraped softly. Triarch Serala Vassal watched Jon Snow as if watching a coin spin in air. "What is it you truly want?" Triarch Serala Vassal asked. "Gold? Titles? Bloodlines? A bride from the old blood?" Jon Snow's answer was immediate. "A foundation," Jon Snow said. "A city that knows how to govern. A harbor that can build fleets. A name the world already fears." Jon Snow's eyes held Triarch Malco-Maegor. "Volantis is the first stone. If the first stone refuses, the first stone becomes rubble." Triarch Malco-Maegor leaned back, fingers steepled. "Volantis will consider," Triarch Malco-Maegor said at last, voice measured. "You will remain within the black walls under guest right." "A cage is not guest right," Jon Snow said. Triarch Malco-Maegor's gaze was calm. "Volantis decides what words mean inside its walls," Triarch Malco-Maegor said. Jon Snow stared at the Triarchs and felt something in Jon Snow settle into certainty. Volantis would not kneel because of reason. Volantis would kneel because of inevitability. Jon Snow inclined Jon Snow's head slightly, not a bow, but acknowledgement that the next move belonged to fire. "Then Jon Snow will wait," Jon Snow said softly, "and Volantis will decide how much of Volantis remains when the decision is done." Nyrax's amber eyes did not leave the dais as Jon Snow was escorted away. The dragon's gaze looked less like a pet's and more like a judge's. Volantis did not give Jon Snow a cell with bars. Volantis gave Jon Snow a villa with guards. It was a beautiful prison. Marble floors, curtained windows, a courtyard with a shallow pool where lotus flowers floated. Slaves moved silently, offering wine and food. Tiger-Cloaks stood at every gate, spears upright, faces blank. The message was clear. Volantis would not chain Jon Snow like a common man. Volantis would wrap Jon Snow in luxury and call it control. Jon Snow walked through the villa at night and felt Nyrax's restlessness like heat under skin. The dragon was penned in the courtyard, wings folded tight, watched by terrified guards who pretended bravery. Nyrax's eyes never closed fully. Nyrax listened to the city's heartbeat and did not like it. Rhaena Soren found Jon Snow by the courtyard pool, moonlight silvering Jon Snow's face. "Volantis is stalling," Rhaena Soren said. Jon Snow watched ripples spread across the water as a night insect touched it. "Volantis is gathering knives," Jon Snow replied. Alex Vassar approached quietly. "And you are gathering what?" Alex Vassar asked. Jon Snow turned, eyes dark. "People," Jon Snow said. Alex Vassar's gaze sharpened. "Slaves. Slaves are an army already assembled," Jon Snow said flatly. "Volantis keeps them fed enough to work and beaten enough to obey. Jon Snow offers a different master, law." Jon Snow's mouth tightened, or at least a different fear. Rhaena Soren's voice was low. "How do we speak to them?" Rhaena Soren asked. "We're watched." Jon Snow's burned palm pulsed. Jon Snow reached into Jon Snow's pouch and pulled out a silver coin. "Jon Snow speaks the way Volantis speaks," Jon Snow said. "With currency. With symbol." Jon Snow tossed the coin to Rhaena Soren. "Give this to a slave who looks like they still remember anger." Rhaena Soren stared, then nodded once. Sharp. Rhaena Soren moved through the villa like a shadow, slipping past servants with a familiarity born from living among predators. Later, near midnight, a soft knock came at a service door. A slave boy stood there trembling, eyes darting, and beckoned quickly before fear could change the boy's mind. Jon Snow followed with Rhaena Soren, Alex Vassar staying behind to watch Nyrax and the guards. They slipped through narrow alleys behind the villa, places the old blood did not walk. The air smelled different here. Sweat, river mud, damp stone. Rats skittered. Somewhere a woman cried softly, the sound quickly smothered. In a hidden alley near the river, a small group waited, slaves mostly, a few poor free men with hungry eyes. Their faces were lit by a single lantern. Chains glinted on wrists. Fear hung over them like damp cloth. A man stepped forward, hands manacled, shoulders scarred. His name, whispered, was Tessario Venn. His eyes were sharp, not dead. Tessario Venn opened his palm, revealing the silver coin Rhaena Soren had given. Tessario Venn's fingers curled around it as if it were a seed. Tessario Venn looked at Jon Snow and swallowed. "You're real," Tessario Venn whispered. "The dragon is real." Jon Snow did not waste time on reassurance. "Volantis will kill Tessario Venn for standing here," Jon Snow said. "So Tessario Venn should make it worth dying." Tessario Venn's mouth twitched, half smile, half grimace. "Tessario Venn has been dying for years," Tessario Venn said. Tessario Venn would like to do it loudly. A murmur ran through the gathered slaves. Fear and hunger mixed. Jon Snow's voice was low, steady. "Jon Snow is not here to free Volantis and then leave it to rot," Jon Snow said. "Jon Snow is here to build. Jon Snow is here to end the old blood's lie." Jon Snow held up the burned palm. "Jon Snow has law from Old Valyria. Jon Snow will make Volantis the first city of the new freehold. Slavery will end. Those who work will be paid. Those who govern will be bound by oath. Those who rebel will burn." One slave woman flinched at the word burn, but her eyes did not look away. "And if the Triarchs kill you?" she whispered. Jon Snow looked at the faces, at the chains. "Then Nyrax burns the black walls until there is nothing left but memory," Jon Snow said. But Jon Snow does not intend to die. Tessario Venn leaned closer, voice rough. "We can open gates," Tessario Venn said. "We can poison wells. We can cut throats in alleys. But we need a signal. We need to know when." Rhaena Soren's eyes flicked upward, listening. "They're patrolling heavier tonight," Rhaena Soren murmured. A distant shout echoed from somewhere near the villa. Guards changing shift, perhaps, or a drunk free man making sport. The alley's lantern flame trembled. Jon Snow's gaze lifted to the rooftops. Now, Jon Snow said. Rhaena Sorin stiffened. Jon Snow. Jon Snow's voice did not change. Volantis is deciding, Jon Snow said. Jon Snow will force the decision. Jon Snow stepped back into deeper shadow and raised the burned palm toward the sky, toward the statue tops and rooflines. Jon Snow did not shout. Jon Snow simply willed. Nyrax answered. A roar rolled over Volantis, deep and furious, shaking birds from eaves and silencing laughter. On a rooftop above, the dragon perched on a stone statue, some ancient hero, now dwarfed by living fire. Sparks fell like embers into the street below. The roar made the black walls feel less absolute, more like something that could crack. Tiger-Cloak patrols turned in panic, spears angling upward, eyes wide. Bells began to ring in the distance. Alarm, confusion, fear spreading fast through a city that had not heard Dragonfire in centuries, if ever. In the alley, slaves inhaled as one body. Some trembled, some smiled, faces breaking open as if remembering forgotten muscles. Tessario Venn's voice was hoarse. "That's the signal," Tessario Venn whispered. Jon Snow looked at the gathered faces, at the chains glinting in lantern light. "When the black walls burn," Jon Snow said softly, "Volantis chooses." Jon Snow's eyes were dark as the river. "And so do you." Far above, Nyrax roared again, louder, and Volantis, proud, ancient, arrogant, finally began to understand that the guest in its villa was not a petitioner. The guest was an arrival. The roar did not end when the echoes died. It sank into Volantis like a hook. In the villa courtyard, Tiger-Cloaks shifted and pretended their spears were steady. The guards who had been laughing earlier, men fattened on the certainty that no one challenged the black walls, now watched the rooftops as if the tiles might split and spill flame. Nyrax paced the pool's edge, claws clicking on marble, wings half unfurled, tail lashing in irritation at the city's stink. Smoke leaked from its nostrils in lazy, contemptuous curls. Jon Snow listened to the bells until they found rhythm. Alarm always did. It started as chaos and became order the moment men learned what they were meant to fear. A knock came at the main doors, hard, official, too early for the hour. A slave opened them without meeting anyone's eyes. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon stepped in with 2 Tiger-Cloaks at his back and 3 servants carrying covered trays. His face was smoothed into the expression of a man delivering a favor. "Guest right," Magistrate Valeso Rindoon announced, voice loud enough for the courtyard guards to hear. "The Triarchs invite you to a midnight offering, a token of peace, a reminder that Volantis honors old blood." Jon Snow did not move from the pool's edge. "Volantis honors convenience," Jon Snow said. "Speak plainly." Magistrate Valeso Rindoon's gaze flicked to Nyrax and away again, the smallest betrayal of fear. "You have unsettled the city," Magistrate Valeso Rindoon said. "The Triarchs prefer this ends without incident. Drink with us, eat with us. Let Volantis see you can be reasonable." Alex Vassar stood to Jon Snow's left, posture loose, eyes sharp. Rhaena Sorin stood to the right, her hand resting on a dagger she had not bothered to hide. Slaves hovered in the doorway shadows, holding their breath as if even air might be punished. Jon Snow watched the trays. The covers were embroidered with tigers. The smell beneath them, wine, spiced meat, was strong enough to hide other scents. Nyrax's head lifted. The dragon's throat vibrated with a low sound that was not a growl but close. His tongue flicked, tasting the air. Smoke thickened, coiling toward the trays like a curious serpent. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon saw the dragon's attention and forced a smile. "It seems the beast is hungry," Magistrate Valeso Rindoon said. "It seems Volantis is lying," Jon Snow replied. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon's smile tightened. "Do not insult Volantis," Magistrate Valeso Rindoon warned, and the words sounded ridiculous standing beneath a dragon's shadow. Jon Snow stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Jon Snow did not look at the magistrate. Jon Snow looked at the servants carrying the trays. 3 men with shaved heads, eyes downcast, wrists ringed with iron. One of them trembled, not from the dragon, from the magistrate. "Lift the covers," Jon Snow ordered. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon bristled. "That is not." "Lift," Jon Snow repeated, and Nyrax's wings rustled like a threat. The servant's hands shook as he pulled the cover away. Beneath lay cups of dark wine, a platter of roasted birds glazed in honey and pepper, small bowls of pale sauce. The scent was rich, seductive. It carried a second scent too, faint and bitter at the edge, like almonds, like crushed leaves. Rena Sorin's eyes narrowed. "Poison," Rena Sorin murmured. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon's face flushed. "Ridiculous," Magistrate Valeso Rindoon snapped. "Volantis." Nyrax lunged forward and snapped its jaws inches from the wine cups. The dragon did not bite the cups. It only exhaled. A breath of heat rolled over the wine and the surface shimmered. A thin skin formed, then cracked. The scent sharpened, bitter more obvious now, dragged into the open by warmth. Alex Vassar's voice was calm as stone. "You brought death on a tray," Alex Vassar said. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon's eyes darted. The Tiger-Cloaks behind him shifted, hands tightening on spears. Their courage returned briefly in a familiar shape: obedience. Jon Snow picked up one wine cup and held it out toward Magistrate Valeso Rindoon. "Drink," Jon Snow said. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon's throat bobbed. "I am a magistrate of..." Nyrax's head swung, amber eyes fixed on Magistrate Valeso Rindoon, and the dragon's mouth opened just enough that heat touched the magistrate's face. Sweat sprang out across his upper lip. Jon Snow's voice remained quiet. "Drink," Jon Snow said again, "or Nyrax will burn you where you stand and Volantis will call it an accident of temper." For a heartbeat, Magistrate Valeso Rindoon looked like he might refuse out of spite alone. Then survival asserted itself. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon took the cup with fingers that had stopped pretending not to shake. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon raised it, hesitated, then drank. The reaction was not immediate. Poison rarely was when men wanted theater. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon swallowed, forced another mouthful, then handed the cup back with a smile that was more grimace than triumph. "See," Magistrate Valeso Rindoon said hoarsely. "No poison." Nyrax hissed softly, almost amused. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon's confidence lasted 3 breaths. Then his face tightened. A cough tore out of him. He coughed again, harder, and the sound turned wet. His hand went to his throat, fingers clawing at skin as if he could pull the poison out. The Tiger-Cloak stepped forward, alarm flaring. Magistrate Valeso Rindoon tried to speak. Only a rasp came. His knees buckled. He fell to the marble, choking, eyes wide with disbelief. Jon Snow watched him die without flinching. The villa's slaves watched too, and something in their faces shifted. Fear, yes, but also a sudden bright cruelty of hope. They had watched masters kill them for less. Now they watched a master's man die by his own hand. Alex Vassar's gaze moved from the magistrate to the servants. "Who mixed it?" Alex Vassar asked softly. The Tremblin. G's servant who had lifted the cover made a tiny, broken sound. "They," he whispered. "They said if I refused, they would take my sister." Rena Sorin's jaw clenched, anger sharp enough to cut. Jon Snow stepped past Magistrate Valeso Rindoon's body and looked at the 2 Tiger-Cloaks. "Carry him back," Jon Snow said. "Tell the Triarchs the gift was received." The Tiger-Cloaks stared, stunned, then moved with the stiff efficiency of men who had lost their script. They lifted the magistrate's body, avoiding the spreading dark stain on marble, and backed out through the doors as if afraid to turn their backs on Nyrax. When they were gone, the courtyard held a silence deeper than before. Nyrax settled beside the pool, smoke thinning, satisfaction in the dragon's posture like a cat after a kill. Jon Snow looked at the slaves who had watched. "Volantis will try again," Jon Snow said. "Volantis will use your hands to do it. If you bring poison again, Jon Snow will know. If you warn Jon Snow will remember. One slave, a woman with a scar across her cheek, met Jon Snow's gaze for the first time. Her eyes were dark and hard, and in them Jon Snow saw the city's true foundation. Rhaena Soren exhaled slowly. They've chosen their answer, Rhaena Soren said. Jon Snow nodded once. Then Jon Snow chooses the hour, Jon Snow replied. The hour came disguised as work. Volantis tightened after the magistrate's death, not with open violence but with watching. Tiger-Cloaks doubled on the villa gates. New faces appeared at corners, pretending to be merchants, pretending to be beggars. Slaves were questioned in the kitchens. Servants vanished. The city's fear did what fear always did. It reached for control. Jon Snow used the pressure the way a smith used heat. It softened the metal. By day, Jon Snow walked Volantis' inner streets under escort, letting the old blood see a dragon and a man who did not bow. By night, Jon Snow slipped through the seams beneath their silk. The slave boy who had knocked at the service door returned again, eyes wide, voice almost soundless. "Tessario Venn," he whispered. "He says now." Rhaena Soren wrapped the green glass candle in cloth and tucked it beneath her cloak. Alex Vassar checked the villa courtyard. Guards clustered near the pool, eyes fixed on Nyrax, who lay with wings folded like a sleeping knife. The dragon's attention made men stupid. They watched the fire while shadows moved behind them. They left through a servant passage and down a narrow stair into darkness that smelled of damp stone and old filth. The air cooled immediately. Water dripped somewhere steady, counting seconds like a patient man. Tessario Venn waited in a low tunnel where torchlight barely reached. Chains hung from his wrists, but the chains were loosened now, one link pried open, evidence of quiet work and stubborn hands. Scars ridged his shoulders like raised rope. His eyes were bright with the only hunger slavery could not beat out of a man: the hunger to act. "You heard the bells," Tessario Venn said. "The city is on edge. The old blood is angry. The patrols are drunk on orders. They'll get sober when they start killing," Alex Vassar replied. Tessario Venn's mouth twisted. "They're already killing," Tessario Venn said. "Just more loudly now." Tessario Venn led them deeper through tunnels that ran like veins beneath the black walls. Some were ancient, cut when Volantis was young and did not trust its own streets. Others were newer, channels carved by slaves under the pretense of drainage, widened by hands that had nothing left to lose. They passed niches where men slept curled like dogs, eyes opening briefly, then closing. They passed piles of broken chains saved like treasure. The green glass candle's glow seeped through Rhaena Soren's cloak, faint as swamp light. Shadows moved wrong along the stone. At a fork, Tessario Venn stopped and pressed his ear to a stone slab. Voices murmured beyond it. Guards above, talking about the dragon, about the magistrate, about the Triarchs' rage. One laughed nervously and said the Triarchs would put Nyrax in a cage and make Jon Snow kneel. Another said cages did not hold fire. Tessario Venn looked back. "We can open the river gate," Tessario Venn said. "Not the main gate. The service gate where grain comes in, where bodies go out. It's chained from within, but we have keys. We have men in the winch house." Rhaena Soren's eyes narrowed. "That puts your people in front," Rhaena Soren said. Tessario Venn's gaze did not flinch. "We have been in front all our lives," Tessario Venn replied. "This time we want to choose what hits us." Alex Vassar asked the question that mattered. "What about the scorpions?" Tessario Venn's lips tightened. "There are 3 towers with them," Tessario Venn said. "The towers are guarded by Tiger-Cloaks and by men of the old blood who enjoy killing from distance." Tessario Venn glanced at the green glow beneath Rhaena Soren's cloak. "But there are tunnels that come up under one tower. Old sewer, half collapsed. We can get men there. We can set oil. We can light it when the signal comes." Jon Snow listened, feeling the city's bones through stone. "You want fire under a tower," Jon Snow said. Tessario Venn nodded once. "We want the scorpions blind," Tessario Venn said. "So your dragon is safe." so the black walls learn they can crack. Rhaena Sorin shifted, voice low. And the eggs? Jon Snow's hand went instinctively to the leather pouch at his belt, as if the scrolls could be stolen by thought alone. The eggs move tonight, Jon Snow said. Not to the tunnels. Too damp. Jon Snow looked at Tessario Venn. Do you have a place above where the old blood will not search?
Tessario Venn hesitated.
There's a shrine, Tessario Venn said finally. Not inside the Red Temple. Smaller. A forgotten alcove in the old dragon mosaics near the river. The old blood doesn't go there. They don't like reminders of what they aren't. Alex Vassar's gaze sharpened. You trust this man, Alex Vassar said to Jon Snow. Not accusation, only caution. Jon Snow looked at Tessario Venn's manacles, at the broken link, at the way Tessario Venn stood like a man already halfway out of a grave. Jon Snow trusts desire, Jon Snow said. Tessario Venn wants the same thing Jon Snow wants. The old blood on their knees. Tessario Venn's mouth twitched, grim. Not on their knees, Tessario Venn corrected. On their backs. Jon Snow's eyes stayed cold. Knees first, Jon Snow said. So the city sees choice. Jon Snow leaned closer, voice dropping. Then the law. Rhaena Sorin drew the green glass candle out, just enough for its glow to paint their faces. The light turned Tessario Venn's scars into shadows and made Jon Snow's burn mark flare faintly beneath skin. When? Rhaena Sorin asked. Jon Snow watched the green light ripple along stone and thought of the Triarchs' hall, of silk and arrogance, of poison on a tray. Dawn, Jon Snow said. Tessario Venn's breath hissed through teeth. Fear flashed, then hardened into resolve. Then we need the signal, Tessario Venn said. Jon Snow nodded. The black walls will see it, Jon Snow replied. And the slaves will hear it. Jon Snow's gaze slid upward, as if seeing through stone to sky. Nyrax will make the city. Remember what dragons mean. They moved back through the tunnels, and as they walked, more faces emerged from niches. Slaves with knives made from broken hooks, slaves with stones wrapped in cloth, slaves with nothing but hands and hate. They did not speak. They did not cheer. They simply watched Jon Snow pass with eyes that had been empty and were now filling with dangerous light. When Jon Snow returned to the villa, Nyrax lifted its head and huffed smoke as if impatient. In the courtyard, the Tiger-Cloaks watched the dragon and did not see the city beneath their feet preparing to open like a wound. Dawn came wet and red. Mist clung to Volantis' streets, carrying river damp and smoke from early hearths. The bells were quiet for the moment, as if the city held its breath after a night of fear. In the villa courtyard, Tiger-Cloaks stood stiff, eyes heavy with sleeplessness, spears upright. Some had drunk to steady their nerves. Drink did not steady a man under a dragon's gaze. It only made him slower. Jon Snow woke before the first servant stirred. Jon Snow dressed in the simplest clothes available. Dark linen, leather, no jewels. The Valyrian steel dagger rode at Jon Snow's hip. The burn mark on Jon Snow's palm throbbed. Not pain now, but anticipation. Rhaena Sorin emerged from a side room with the green glass candle wrapped tight. Alex Vassar checked the window slats, watching the street beyond. The patrols have shifted toward the river, Alex Vassar murmured. They expect something. They are right, Jon Snow said. Nyrax waited in the courtyard like a coiled storm. When Jon Snow approached, the dragon rose, wings unfolding with a soft crackle. Guards stepped back instinctively, pretending it was for space rather than fear. Nyrax lowered its head, amber eyes meeting Jon Snow's, and Jon Snow placed the burned palm on the dragon's neck. Heat surged. Familiar. The bond felt like a blade being drawn. Jon Snow climbed onto Nyrax's back without ceremony. Rhaena Sorin and Alex Vassar slipped out through the servant gate, moving fast and low, cloaks up, toward the tunnels that would bring them near the river gate. The plan did not require them to ride. It required them to be where men would die first. Nyrax leapt. Volantis unfolded beneath them. Rooftops like scales, streets like veins, the black walls like a spine. The river gleamed brown-green, barges moving slow, slaves already at oars under whips that rose and fell on schedule. Nyrax's shadow swept over them and the whips hesitated. Heads lifted, mouths opened. Jon Snow did not fly high. Jon Snow wanted the city to feel Nyrax's heat. The first Scorpion Tower rose near the inner wall, its silhouette ugly and purposeful. Men on its platform looked up, faces pale, hands scrambling. A bold crew tried to swivel the weapon, but the aim was crude, the motion panicked. Nyrax's wings beat once, carrying them past, and Jon Snow felt the hot air of their own movement slap the tower like a hand. From below, a scream rose, not of terror at the dragon, but of sudden chaos. Jon Snow saw it. A knot of slaves in a service yard surging against an overseer, hands grabbing the whip, pulling him down. Another group seized a cart and shoved it sideways across a narrow street, blocking it. A Tiger-Cloak patrol charged, spears down, and the slaves did not scatter. They met them with stones and knives and bare hands. The uprising had begun. Jon Snow guided Nyrax toward the second Scorpion Tower, the one Tessario Venn had marked. For a heartbeat, the tower looked calm. Then smoke began to pour from its base, thick and black, and flames licked up along the stone as oil caught. Men on the platform shouted, tripping over each other as heat rose beneath their boots. The scorpion sagged as ropes burned. A bolt clattered uselessly to the deck. Nyrax roared. The sound rolled across the black walls and down into the city's belly. It was not a call for battle. It was a declaration that battle already existed. On the river, a service gate sat low in the wall, barred with iron and chained from within. Above it, Tiger-Cloaks crowded, trying to form a line, eyes flicking between street chaos and the sky. Jon Snow saw Rhoyne Sorin and Aelix Vassar emerge from a side alley with Tessario Venn and a flood of slaves behind them. Men with broken chains wrapped around fists, women with knives, boys carrying stones. They moved like a tide held back too long. The gate winch house door burst open. A slave inside, a man with a missing ear, turned the crank with frantic strength. Chains clanked, iron groaned. Tiger-Cloaks rushed down the stairs toward the winch house, spears stabbing. Aelix Vassar met them first, blade flashing, cutting tendons rather than throats, dropping men without killing when possible. Rhoyne Sorin moved like a shadow, dagger finding gaps, fast and clean. Jon Snow brought Nyrax down hard on the wall's walkway above the gate. The landing shook stone. Tiger-Cloaks stumbled. Some raised spears. Nyrax's head swung, eyes blazing, and the men froze, instincts overriding training. Jon Snow stood on the dragon's back and looked down at them. "Open," Jon Snow said, voice carrying. The iron gate shuddered as the chain slackened. It swung outward inch by inch like a jaw opening. The first slaves pushed through, faces split with disbelief and rage. A Tiger-Cloak captain stepped forward, trying to salvage authority. "This is treason," the captain shouted. "By order of the Triarchs." Nyrax exhaled a thin ribbon of fire that traced the stone between the captain's boots. Heat licked up, close enough to blister. The captain recoiled, pride crumbling. Jon Snow's voice did not rise. "By order of the new law," Jon Snow said. "Kneel, or burn." Some men dropped to their knees at once, spears clattering. Others hesitated, caught between habit and survival. The slaves behind them surged, and the hesitating men understood quickly what the world had become. The river gate stood open, spilling the city's underside into its heart. Bells began to ring again, frantic now, no longer controlled. From above, Jon Snow saw the black walls, once so absolute, now marked by smoke and flame. A crack in stone, yes, but more than that. A crack in certainty. Nyrax roared once more, and Volantis answered with screams, with shouts, with the sound of chains breaking like bones. The Triarchs did not wait for the city to settle. They tried to cut its head off while it still learned its limbs. Jon Snow felt the trap before it closed. Came as a change in the air, too still, too clean, like the moment before a storm. From the river gate, Jon Snow could see toward the inner streets where old blood villas clustered and where the Triarchs' hall sat like a jewel in a clenched fist. Smoke rose from one scorpion tower, black against pale morning. Slaves and soldiers clashed in alleys. The city shook. A messenger rode hard through the chaos, escorted by Tiger-Cloaks who shoved bodies aside with spear butts. The rider's cloak was striped, but the cut was richer, old blood. He dismounted near the gate with exaggerated calm, as if refusing to acknowledge the screams. Jon Snow, the rider called, voice-carrying. Triarch Malco Maegor offers parley. Now, within the hall, safe passage, guest right. Aelix Vassar's eyes narrowed. They already poisoned guest right, Aelix Vassar murmured. Rena Sorin spat into the dust. They want you under a roof, Rena Sorin said, where scorpions can pin Nyrax and nets can drop. Tessario Venn stood behind them, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles. My people are taking streets, Tessario Venn said, but the old blood has armored men. They'll regroup. They'll slaughter unless you break their spine. Jon Snow looked toward the Triarchs' hall. The building's roofline cut through smoke like a blade. Then Jon Snow goes, Jon Snow said. Aelix Vassar stiffened. Alone. Not alone, Jon Snow said, and glanced at Rena Sorin. Rena Sorin comes. Aelix Vassar comes. Jon Snow's gaze shifted to Tessario Venn. Tessario Venn holds the gate. If Jon Snow dies, Tessario Venn burns the city anyway. Tessario Venn's mouth tightened. Understood, Tessario Venn said, and it was not loyalty. It was agreement between men who both knew mercy was expensive. Nyrax carried Jon Snow over the inner streets toward the hall, low enough that heat touched rooftops. The city below convulsed. In one courtyard, slaves dragged an overseer from a fountain and beat him with his own whip. In another, Tiger-Cloaks formed a shield wall and pushed back a mob, spears stabbing. The smell of smoke thickened. Somewhere a warehouse burned, sending sparks into the sky like insects. The Triarchs' hall sat within a wide plaza lined with columns carved in dragons and tigers. The plaza was filled with soldiers, Tiger-Cloaks, old blood guards in better armor, men with scorpion bolts on carts. Nets lay coiled like sleeping snakes. When Nyrax's shadow passed over them, the soldiers looked up and their line wavered. Jon Snow landed Nyrax on the plaza stones with a heavy thud. The impact cracked a tile. Men flinched back. Spears lifted. A scorpion crew scrambled to aim, but their hands shook. Triarch Malco Maegor stood at the hall steps with Triarch Serala Vassal beside him. Triarch Polar Narealer was there too, expression sharp with hatred, fingers tapping against a ringed hilt. Behind them, the hall doors were open, inviting, waiting. Triarch Malco Maegor raised his hands. Peace, Triarch Malco Maegor called. We do not wish Volantis to burn. Jon Snow stepped off Nyrax's back and walked forward. Rena Sorin and Aelix Vassar moved with him, flanking. Nyrax stayed behind, wings half spread, eyes fixed on the dais like a predator measuring distance. You already chose burning, Jon Snow said. Jon Snow's voice was calm, carrying across the plaza. With poison, with whips, with scorpions. Jon Snow looked at the nets. With cages. Triarch Serala Vassal's smile was thin. You are a man, Jon Snow, Triarch Serala Vassal said softly. Not a god. Volantis can offer you what you truly want. Recognition, blood, a place among the old families. Triarch Polar Narealer's eyes glittered. A bride, Triarch Polar Narealer added, voice cruel. A name that doesn't stink of ash. Jon Snow's burned palm pulsed. Jon Snow wants obedience, Jon Snow said. Triarch Malco Maegor's expression tightened. You will not get it this way, Triarch Malco Maegor said. The slaves you stir will tear the city apart. They will kill children. They will burn homes. You will be blamed. You will be hunted. Aelix Vassar's voice cut in flat. You already hunt, Aelix Vassar said. You just call it order. Triarch Polar Narealer's patience snapped. He lifted his hand sharply, a signal. The nets moved. Men hurled them upward toward Nyrax, heavy rope woven with lead weights. Scorpion crews released bolts aimed not at Jon Snow but at the dragon's wings. The plaza erupted into the sound of rope and iron and shouted orders. Nyrax roared and leapt, but the first net caught one wingtip, dragging. A bolt hissed past Nyrax's head close enough that heat from its flight touched scale. Another bolt struck a column and shattered stone. Jon Snow turned toward Nyrax, burned palm raised. Pain flared, bright and fierce. "Nyrax," Jon Snow commanded. The dragon answered with fire, not in a wild sweep but in deliberate arcs. Flame licked along the net's rope, snapping it into blackened strands. Another tongue of fire struck a scorpion cart, igniting oiled wood. Men screamed and scattered as the weapon burned. Triarch Palar Narealer's face twisted with fury. "Kill him," Triarch Palar Narealer shouted. Old Bloodguards surged forward with blades raised. Rena Sorin moved first, dagger flashing, striking a man's throat quick enough that the blood seemed to appear after the body fell. Alex Vassar stepped into the press, blade low, cutting knees, dropping men into piles, efficient as a butcher. Jon Snow drew the Valyrian steel dagger and met the first guard head-on. The dagger slid through bronze scale as if through cloth. Jon Snow did not revel. Jon Snow moved like a man who had decided killing was a tool and refused to let it become pleasure. Jon Snow stepped, cut, stepped again, feeling the sea. Bull blade in Jon Snow's hand like a counterweight to the heat in Jon Snow's blood. Triarch Serala Vassal backed up the steps, eyes wide now, the smile gone. Triarch Malco Maegor stayed still, watching, calculating. Triarch Palar Narealer lunged forward, drawing a sword that gleamed pale, Valyrian steel, or an imitation that wanted men to think it was. Triarch Palar Narealer swung at Jon Snow's head with a snarl. Jon Snow parried with the Valyrian dagger, metal ringing, shock running up Jon Snow's arm. Jon Snow pivoted and drove the dagger into Triarch Palar Narealer's side, just under the ribs where armor gapped. Triarch Palar Narealer gasped, eyes flaring in disbelief. Triarch Palar Narealer tried to speak. Instead he coughed blood. Nyrax's shadow fell over them. The dragon's head lowered, close enough that Triarch Palar Narealer could see his own death reflected in amber eyes. Nyrax opened its mouth. Jon Snow did not look away. "No," Jon Snow said quietly, too late. Nyrax breathed, and Triarch Palar Narealer became a bright, brief shape of flame that fell backward onto the steps, screaming once before the scream ended. The plaza went still with shock. Triarch Malco Maegor's face did not change, but his eyes did. The calculation sharpened into decision. Triarch Malco Maegor lowered his head. "Enough," Triarch Malco Maegor said hoarsely. "Volantis." Triarch Malco Maegor swallowed. "Volantis will kneel." Jon Snow stepped up the steps, smoke curling around Jon Snow's boots, and looked at the surviving Triarchs. "Not Volantis," Jon Snow corrected. "You." Triarch Serala Vassal's knees buckled slowly, pride crumbling into survival. Triarch Malco Maegor followed. Behind them, the hall doors stood open like a throat. Inside waited the city's heart. Jon Snow walked toward it as if toward a forge, and the sound of Volantis burning rose behind like a chorus that would not stop until law replaced chain. Volantis learned the shape of a new master in the same way it learned everything, with spectacle. Jon Snow did not drag the Triarchs through the streets in chains. Chains were the old blood's language. Jon Snow dragged them in silence, guarded by freed men with knives and by Tiger-Cloaks who had chosen knees over ash. The plaza outside the hall filled as word spread faster than smoke. Slaves poured in from alleys, eyes wide, some still bleeding. Poor free men gathered too, drawn by the smell of history. Old blood watched from balconies, faces pale, hands gripping railings as if stone might save them. Nyrax perched on the hall's steps like a dark crown, wings folded, smoke curling from its nostrils in thin threads. The dragon's presence made the crowd's murmurs careful. Tessario Venn stood at the front of the gathering, manacles still on his wrists but the chain between them broken. He held the broken link up like a trophy. The metal caught morning light and looked almost gold. Rena Soren brought the scrolls in a sealed case and placed them on a stone lectern that had once held offerings to Volantis' gods. Alex Vassar moved through the crowd like a shadow, eyes searching for knives, for faces that watched too hard. Jon Snow stepped forward and looked out at the city's mixed sea of eyes. The burn mark on Jon Snow's palm pulsed, steady as a drum. Jon Snow lifted the hand so they could see it. Superstition ran deep in Volantis. Men loved a sign. Jon Snow would use their hunger for it and then starve them of childishness. Jon Snow spoke in High Valyrian first, voice carrying cleanly. Volantis called itself heir, Jon Snow said. Volantis wore old names like perfume. Volantis built its wealth on chains and called it tradition. Jon Snow's gaze swept the rows of slaves. Today the tradition ends. A sound rose, half gasp, half sob. Some slaves fell to their knees as if their bodies had been waiting for permission. Jon Snow raised a finger, not in warning but in command. "Stand," Jon Snow said. The word cut through the crowd.
Tessario, Venn stood taller.
Others followed, trembling, rising as if their legs did not remember how. Jon Snow opened the scroll case. The parchment inside was brittle, but the seal held. Jon Snow did not read it like a priest. Jon Snow read it like a ruler setting terms. "By the compact of the Freehold," Jon Snow said, translating the old words into the tongue the crowd understood. "No man is property. No child is property. Labor is taxed, not owned. Those who govern swear oath to law and are judged by law." The old blood on balconies hissed, outrage leaking through fear. One man shouted, "This is theft." Another shouted, "This is madness." Jon Snow did not look up. Jon Snow looked at the Tiger-Cloaks standing uncertain at the edge of the crowd. "Those who served the Triarchs have a choice," Jon Snow said. "Keep your spears and serve the compact, or keep your pride and burn with it." Captain Sargon Penimian pushed forward through the Tiger-Cloaks, helm tucked under his arm. His face was tight, eyes hard. He stared at the burned steps where Triarch Palar Nariler had died. Then he looked at Jon Snow. Captain Sargon Penimian dropped to one knee. The motion rippled through the soldiers like a stone dropped in water. Men hesitated, then knelt one by one. Spears clattered. A line of obedience formed, not to old blood but to survival and to the strange new order Jon Snow offered. Triarch Malco Maegor and Triarch Serala Vassal knelt at the lectern's base, guarded, their robes stained with ash. Triarch Serala Vassal's lips were pressed tight as if biting back curses. Triarch Malco Maegor's face was pale, eyes fixed on the scrolls as if watching the future being written without him. Jon Snow looked at them. "You will live," Jon Snow said. "For now. Volantis needs to see that surrender buys breath. But your houses will pay. Your wealth will fund the rebuilding you refused. Your children will serve in the new administration as wards. If any old blood rises, your heads will answer." Triarch Malco Maegor swallowed, and for the first time his voice lost its certainty. "You cannot hold Volantis," Triarch Malco Maegor whispered. "Not with one dragon. Not with slaves who have never governed. The free cities will come. Bravos will come. The world will come." Jon Snow's eyes were cold. "Then Jon Snow will build faster than they march," Jon Snow said. Jon Snow turned back to the crowd. "The chains are broken," Jon Snow said, "but the city does not become a mob." Jon Snow pointed toward the streets. "Any man who kills a child will die. Any man who steals food from the hungry will lose his hands. Any man who wears the old blood's cruelty like a crown will be burned." Jon Snow's voice sharpened. "Freedom without order is only another kind of cage." The words landed hard. Some slaves looked frightened, as if the promise of consequence was too familiar. Others looked relieved, as if they had feared the chaos more than the whip. Tessario Venn raised his broken chain again. "We will hold," Tessario Venn shouted, voice cracking. "We will not be beasts." Jon Snow nodded once, acknowledging. "Tessario Venn will be captain of the River Guard. Jon Snow announced. Tessario Venn will answer to law. Tessario Venn will enforce law. A murmur ran through the crowd. Shock, pride, envy. Tessario Venn's eyes shone, not with gratitude but with the weight of responsibility slamming onto his shoulders. Rhaena Sorin stepped close and murmured, "They're listening." Alex Vassar's gaze stayed sharp. "Some are listening to find the first crack," Alex Vassar murmured back. Jon Snow understood. Jon Snow lifted the scroll again, higher so even the balcony old blood could see. "Volantis is the first stone," Jon Snow said. "The new freehold begins here. Those who accept the compact will thrive under it. Those who refuse will be made an example." Nyrax chose that moment to roar deep and thunderous, and the sound rolled over the city like a seal pressed into hot wax. Volantis, which had worshipped chains and old names, now watched law stand beside Dragonfire and realized they were not separate threats. Together they were a system, and systems were harder to kill than men. That night, Volantis tried to take its city back in whispers. The streets inside the black walls were quieter than usual, not with peace but with exhaustion. Fires still burned in pockets where scorpion carts and barricades had caught. Freed men patrolled with stolen spears and hard eyes. Tiger-Cloaks moved in pairs, watched by those they once hunted. Slaves, freed now in name, not yet in habit, walked with heads higher but hands still close to their bodies as if expecting blows. Jon Snow walked the villa corridors that were no longer a prison and did not feel comfort. Comfort dulled. Jon Snow did not intend to dull. Alex Vassar shadowed Jon Snow, silent as always, eyes scanning corners. Rhaena Sorin sat in the courtyard with Nyrax, speaking softly in High Valyrian. Not commands but steady words meant to keep the dragon from turning restless in a city full of new scents and unfamiliar threats. The first sign came as a servant's hesitation. A woman approached with a tray of water and bread, head bowed, hands steady. The bread smelled fresh, too fresh for a city that had been burning all day. Jon Snow watched the woman's fingers, calloused, scarred, honest. Yet her eyes flicked once toward the shadowed archway behind Jon Snow, quick as a sparrow. Jon Snow did not take the bread. Jon Snow's burned palm pulsed, warning. Alex Vassar moved first, stepping between Jon Snow and the tray. "Who told you to bring this?" Alex Vassar asked softly. The woman swallowed. "The steward," she whispered. "Which steward?" Alex Vassar asked. The woman's mouth opened, and in that moment the archway behind them birthed movement. Two figures in dark cloth, faces half-masked, knives in hand. Their steps were quick, practiced, aimed at Jon Snow's ribs. Rhaena Sorin shouted from the courtyard. Nyrax lifted its head, eyes blazing. Alex Vassar met the first assassin with a slash that cut deep into forearm, sending the knife spinning. Jon Snow pivoted and drew the Valyrian steel dagger, meeting the second assassin head-on. The assassin moved like a dancer, blade aimed for Jon Snow's throat, eyes empty of hesitation. Jon Snow parried, metal ringing, and drove a shoulder into the assassin's chest. The assassin stumbled. Jon Snow's dagger flashed, cutting the assassin's thigh, dropping the man. Jon Snow pressed the dagger to the assassin's neck. "Who?" Jon Snow demanded. The first assassin, bleeding, reached into his own sleeve and crushed something between his teeth. Alex Vassar's curse was quiet. "Poison tooth," Alex Vassar hissed. The assassin convulsed, eyes rolling back. Foam gathered at the corner of his mouth. He died without speaking, taking names into darkness. Nyrax's roar shook the courtyard as Rhaena Sorin surged toward the archway, dagger drawn, eyes furious. The dragon's wings flared, and the courtyard guards staggered back, terrified the beast would burn them in reflex. Jon Snow grabbed the living assassin by hair and forced his face up into lantern light. The man's eyes were pale, not Valyrian violet but washed gray. Bravosi, Jon Snow realized, or trained by them. The knife at his belt was curved, strange, not Volantene make. His breath came fast, and in it Jon Snow smelled fear that was professional, controlled. Alex Vassar leaned close. You came from Bravos, Alex Vassar said quietly. Or you learned their tricks. The assassin's lips trembled. I came for coin, he whispered, and it was the truth as far as he dared. Rena Sorin slammed the courtyard gate behind her, cutting off gawking guards. Kill him, Rena Sorin said, voice shaking with rage. They'll keep coming. They'll send more until one lands a blade. Jon Snow stared at the assassin and saw the shape of future threats. Men with faces that could change, men who could walk through any city as if it were their own. Bravos had always hated dragons because dragons ended negotiations. Jon Snow's voice was cold. Who paid you? Jon Snow asked. The assassin's eyes flicked toward the villa's upper windows as if seeing invisible watchers. Old blood, he whispered. You're Triarchs' friends. They don't want chains broken. They don't want... The assassin swallowed hard. They don't want you. Alex Vassar's gaze sharpened. Names. The assassin hesitated too long. Jon Snow felt Nyrax's heat surge behind, felt the dragon's impatience. Jon Snow pressed the dagger's cool edge against the assassin's cheek, leaving a thin red line. Names, Jon Snow repeated, voice soft. The assassin broke. He spat out names, house names, merchant names, men with villas and rings. Some Jon Snow recognized from the balconies. Some were new. The list was a map of Volantis' old spine. When the assassin finished, his breath came in sobbing gasps. Please, he whispered. I spoke. I spoke. Jon Snow released the assassin's hair and stepped back. You spoke because you feared Dragonfire, Jon Snow said. Not because you believe in law. Rena Sorin's jaw clenched. So? Jon Snow raised the burned palm. Nyrax's head swung, amber eyes fixed on the assassin. The dragon exhaled. Just heat, not flame. Enough to make the assassin scream as skin blistered. Enough to make the message clear without turning the courtyard into a pyre. Jon Snow's voice carried into the shadows where ears listened. Volantis will learn, Jon Snow said. Those who buy knives will burn by inches. Alex Vassar watched Jon Snow, eyes unreadable. Rena Sorin looked away, breathing hard, but did not protest. The servant woman who had brought the tray stood trembling in the corridor, tears streaking her face. I didn't know, she whispered. They told me. Jon Snow looked at her and saw what the old blood did with slaves. Turned them into tools and then blamed them for the cut. You warn Jon Snow next time, Jon Snow said. And Jon Snow will find your sister. The woman's sob broke loose. She bowed so hard her forehead touched stone. Outside, Volantis' night held its breath again, but now the breath tasted like smoke and inevitability. The old blood had tested Jon Snow with knives. Jon Snow had answered with a promise. No shadow in this city would stay unlit for long. The next weeks were not war. They were work, and work was harder. It was easy to burn a scorpion. It was easy to break a chain in front of a crowd. It was easy to kill a Triarch and call it justice. It was harder to keep bread on tables without whips. It was harder to stop freed men from becoming new masters wearing different clothes. It was harder to turn a city built on cruelty into a city that could endure. Jon Snow walked Volantis like a man measuring a fortress for flaws. Every street, every gate, every warehouse mattered now. The black walls were not only a symbol, they were a machine. Jon Snow needed that machine running for a new purpose. Tessario Venn took command of the river guard with a severity born from hunger. He placed freed men at the docks to count grain and prevent theft. He placed Tiger-Cloaks beside them, not as lords but as watched weapons. He hung 2 overseers from a warehouse beam on the first day when they tried to lash a slave out of habit. He did not apologize. He made the lesson public. Rena Sorin organized the city's underpaths, the tunnels, the hidden doors, the servant routes, into an intelligence web. Slaves who had once carried messages for masters now carried them for the compact. Rena Sorin moved through Volantis with a hood up and eyes sharp, finding where old blood hid coin, finding which villas still met in secret, finding which Tiger-Cloaks resented kneeling. Alex Vassar took the lists from the captured assassin and turned them into a map of enemies. He did not raid villas with fire. He raided with whispers, quiet arrests, quiet seizures of ledgers, quiet nights where a merchant woke to find his guard captain gone and his wealth counted by men who did not smile. Nyrax was the constant threat that made all the quiet work possible. The dragon perched on rooftops above the shipyards, above the grain houses, above the red temple whose priests watched with hungry eyes. Nyrax's shadow kept men honest when their hearts would not. Jon Snow spent hours at the shipyards. Volantis' yards were enormous. Forests of masts, ribs of half-built hulls, cranes creaking, the air thick with pitch and sawdust. Under the Triarchs, slaves had done the heavy lifting while old blood men supervised with whips and boredom. Now freedmen worked with wary intensity, uncertain whether freedom meant lighter burdens or simply new names for the same weight. Jon Snow walked among them without guards one afternoon, only Nyrax circling overhead. Conversation died as Jon Snow approached. Men's eyes watched, fear and hope tangled. A shipwright stepped forward, hands stained with tar. He was older, hair thin, face weathered by river wind. "I am Daro Rindle," he said, voice rough. "My family builds ships. We built for Triarchs. We build now because we must." His gaze flicked upward at Nyrax. "What do you want built?" "A fleet," Jon Snow said simply. Daro Rindle let out a humorless breath. "Volantis already has a fleet. A fleet that carries slaves," Jon Snow replied. "A fleet that sells bodies and calls it trade." Jon Snow's eyes narrowed. Jon Snow wants a fleet that carries law. Daro Rindle stared as if the words were strange. Then Daro Rindle nodded slowly. "A fleet needs coin," Daro Rindle said. "Timber, iron, pitch, sailcloth, and men who know the sea." "We have coin," Jon Snow said, thinking of seized ledgers and old blood vaults. "We have timber up the Rhoyne. We have iron." Jon Snow's gaze sharpened. "We have men who have been rowing their whole lives. Now they will row because they are paid." A murmur ran through the shipwrights. Paid. The word had weight. Some looked hungry at it. Some looked suspicious, as if it were a trick. Jon Snow pointed toward the largest slipway where a war galley skeleton rose. "That one," Jon Snow said. "Jon Snow wants it finished first." Daro Rindle followed the gesture. "That hull is for 50 oars," Daro Rindle said. "Deep draft, can carry scorpions. It can carry troops." Daro Rindle hesitated. "It was named Tiger's Pride." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "Rename it," Jon Snow said. Daro Rindle blinked. "To what?" Jon Snow looked up at Nyrax's circling shadow. "Ashen Law," Jon Snow said. Word spread through the yard like a spark. Some men smiled faintly, uncertain but intrigued. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the idea that even names could change. Rena Soren joined Jon Snow later near the river, where barges unloaded grain under river guard watch. "Bravos is watching," Rena Soren said quietly. "Merchants are already whispering. Some say the free cities will unite against you. Some say they'll kneel if you take the right port." Alex Vassar came up beside them, eyes narrowed. "And the Red Temple is preaching," Alex Vassar added. "They say the dragon is a sign. They say you are a sword. Swords are meant to be used." Jon Snow stared at the river current, brown water rolling toward the sea. "Then Jon Snow will be used," Jon Snow said, voice flat. "Jon Snow will let them swing the story so long as the story builds the foundation." Nyrax's shadow passed over them, dark and heavy. Jon Snow understood then that conquest would not be only fire. It would be schedules. It would be rations. It would be men who tried to steal and men who tried to rule and men who tried to kill from shadows. It would be endless. And still Jon Snow wanted it because for the first time Jon Snow could see the shape of a world that might not forget him. Volantis' shipyards rang with hammers, and the sound was the beginning of something that could spread beyond one city. An empire built not on one dragon's temper, but on an entire city forced into order by law and fear working hand in hand. The second dragon did not hatch for Jon Snow. That truth sat in Jon Snow like a stone the moment the shell cracked. They moved the eggs from the villa to Tessario Venn's suggested shrine, a forgotten alcove near the river where old dragon mosaics still clung to damp walls. The place smelled of mold and old smoke. A cracked statue of a dragon lord lay half-toppled, face broken, as if time itself had grown tired of arrogance. Few old blood walked here. The stones reminded them too much of what they pretended to inherit. Rena Sorin set the red gold egg on a bed of ash inside the alcove and lit braziers around it, feeding them with charcoal and oil until heat pressed in close. The green glass candle glowed beside the egg, its light making the mosaic dragons seem to ripple as if alive. Alex Vassar stood at the alcove entrance with 2 Tiger-Cloaks and 3 freed men, all watching the alley outside for intruders. Tessario Venn waited in the shadows, manacles gone now, hands wrapped in cloth where blisters had formed from work. His eyes were fixed on the egg like a man watching a horizon for sails. Nyrax crouched in the shrine's mouth, too large for the space now, wings tucked tight. The dragon's nostrils flared at the brazier's heat, smoke curling from its mouth as if irritated by the smaller fire's presumption. Jon Snow knelt beside the egg and placed the burned palm against its warm shell. The mark pulsed. Heat seeped into Jon Snow's skin, but it did not answer the way Nyrax had answered. It did not reach back. It remained stubbornly private. Rena Sorin watched Jon Snow's hand, expression tight. "It's not listening to you," Rena Sorin said quietly. Jon Snow did not pull away. "Maybe it needs time," Jon Snow said. Rena Sorin's gaze shifted to the egg. The red gold veins beneath shell looked brighter in the candlelight, like embers waking. "Maybe it wants someone else," Rena Sorin whispered, and the words felt dangerous in the damp air. Jon Snow turned, meeting Rena Sorin's eyes. In them Jon Snow saw fear, not of fire, but of power becoming divided. In Old Valyria's ruins, division had meant death. In the Freehold's history, division had meant doom. Jon Snow took a slow breath. "Touch it," Jon Snow said. Rena Sorin stiffened. "Jon, touch it," Jon Snow repeated. "If it burns you, it burns you. If it chooses you, it chooses you." Jon Snow's voice was quiet but iron. Jon Snow will not rebuild a freehold alone. Rena Sorin's throat worked. Rena Sorin looked at the egg as if it were a blade offered hilt first. Then Rena Sorin knelt beside Jon Snow and placed both hands on the shell. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the egg shuddered. A thin crack spread across the red gold surface, branching like lightning. Rena Sorin's breath hitched. Jon Snow felt heat flare, sharp, sudden, and saw Rena Sorin's eyes widen as if something had reached into Rena Sorin's chest. Nyrax hissed, wings rustling, reacting to the scent of birth. The egg split, and a wet, red gold head emerged, scales gleaming like fresh forged metal. The hatchling's eyes opened and fixed, not on Jon Snow, but on Rena Sorin. They were not amber like Nyrax's. They were a deep, molten copper, bright with fierce intelligence. The hatchling made a sound, thin, furious, and lunged not toward Jon Snow's hand but toward Rena Sorin's wrist, biting lightly, not to harm but to claim. Rena Sorin gasped as pain flared, and on Rena Sorin's skin a small dark mark appeared where teeth had pressed, an imprint like a tiny brand. Jon Snow's burned palm throbbed in sympathy, as if acknowledging the new bond being sealed. Rena Sorin stared down at the hatchling, trembling. Rena Sorin whispered. It chose you," Jon Snow finished. The hatchling climbed into Rena Sorin's hands, claws pricking skin, and curled there as if it had always belonged. Its heat was intense, almost painful, and yet Rena Sorin did not let go. Rena Sorin's eyes shone with something raw, terror and awe braided tight. Alex Vassar stepped closer, eyes widening, voice rough. "2 dragons," Alex Vassar murmured. "2 riders." Tessario Venn's mouth opened, then closed, as if words were too small. He made a soft sound that might have been laughter or prayer. Nyrax watched the hatchling with amber eyes, head tilted, as if judging a sibling. The larger dragon's tail flicked once, then settled. Nyrax did not challenge. Nyrax accepted. Rhaena Sorin looked up at Jon Snow, face wet without realizing. "What now?" Rhaena Sorin asked, voice shaking. Jon Snow watched the hatchling's red gold scales catch candlelight like a flame trapped in flesh. Jon Snow thought of the free cities, of Braavos' knives, of the black walls, of Westeros across the narrow sea still sleeping in its own ignorance. 2 dragons meant more than double fire. It meant momentum. It meant inevitability. Jon Snow's voice was quiet. "Name it," Jon Snow said. Rhaena Sorin swallowed, looking down at the hatchling as if searching for the right truth. "Viserys," Rhaena Sorin whispered finally. The name sounded like an old prayer and a new threat. The hatchling, Viserys, hissed softly and pressed its head against Rhaena Sorin's palm, as if answering. Jon Snow stood and felt the city's damp air on Jon Snow's face. "Then Volantis is no longer a city with a dragon," Jon Snow said. "Volantis is the start of a freehold." Outside the alcove, river water slid past stone like time itself. Above, somewhere beyond rooftops and smoke, the world waited to learn what it meant when Valyria returned with not 1 dragon, but 2. When the envoys came, they wore smiles like shields. They arrived by river and by road in the days after Viserys hatched, drawn by rumor and fear. Volantis had always been a loud city, and its screams carried far. Merchants whispered of a dragon over the black walls. Slavers whispered of chains breaking. Princes whispered of a compact, words from Old Valyria itself, spoken by a man with a northern name and a burned palm. Jon Snow received them in the Triarchs' hall, stripped of its old ceremony. The draped black cloth had been torn down. The dais was still there, but the chairs were empty. Where Triarch Palar Narealar had died, the stone remained stained dark despite scrubbing. The hall smelled faintly of smoke beneath incense, a truth perfume could not erase. Triarch Malcomager and Triarch Serala Vassal sat at a side table under guard, no longer rulers but hostages. Their children, 2 boys and a girl, pale-haired and silent, stood behind them with eyes wide, learning early that blood did not make men untouchable. Nyrax lay coiled near the columns, wings folded, eyes half-lidded but attentive. Viserys perched on a carved dragon head above the dais, small yet, red gold scales gleaming, watching the hall with bright copper eyes. Rhaena Sorin stood beneath Viserys, one hand resting on the hatchling's tail as if anchoring a storm. Aelix Vassar moved behind the envoys, silent as a warning. The first to speak was a man from Lys, silk robes, oiled beard, perfume thick enough to choke. "Volantis has always been dramatic," he said, smile stretched. "We are pleased you have restored order. Lys values stability. Lys values bodies," Tessario Venn muttered from the side, and the Lyseni envoy pretended not to hear. A man from Myr followed, thin, pale, eyes sharp. He spoke of trade routes and tariffs. A Tyroshi woman spoke of alliances and mutual defense, her hair dyed bright blue like a banner meant to distract from the steel in her gaze. Each offered words, each withheld truth. Each watched Nyrax and tried to calculate how quickly fire could cross water. Last came the Braavosi. He was plain compared to the others, gray cloak, no jewelry, hands clean. His face was forgettable in the way some knives were forgettable until you felt the cut. He bowed shallowly. "I am called Oro," he said. "Braavos sends respect and caution." Jon Snow's eyes did not blink. "Braavos sent knives," Jon Snow said. Oro's mouth tightened faintly. "Braavos sends many things," Oro replied. "Knives are among them. Dragons are another." The hall grew still. Even the Lyseni envoy stopped smiling. Oro's gaze flicked to Viserys, then to Nyrax. "Braavos was founded by those who fled Valyria," Oro said quietly. "Braavos remembers the Freehold as a whip made of fire. Braavos will not accept its return." Jon Snow leaned forward slightly. "Then Braavos will die," Jon Snow said, voice calm as a judge. A hiss ran through the envoy's shock calculation. Oro's expression did not change. "There are other options," Oro said. "Bravos can pay. Bravos can trade. Bravos can tolerate your city as long as your dragons remain east." Jon Snow's burned palm pulsed. "No," Jon Snow said. "The Freehold does not stop at one city. Volantis is the first stone. The next stones will join willingly or be set by force." Jon Snow's gaze swept the envoys. "Those are the terms." Triarch Ser Vassal laughed softly, bitter. "Listen to him," Triarch Ser Vassal said. "He speaks like a dragon lord already." Jon Snow looked at Triarch Ser Vassal. "Jon Snow speaks like law," Jon Snow said. Oro's eyes narrowed. "Law enforced by Dragonfire is still fear," Oro said. "Fear is honest," Jon Snow replied. "Fear keeps liars from pretending their hands are clean." Rena Soren's voice cut in, quiet but sharp. "Bravos is welcome to test the compact," Rena Soren said. Rena Soren lifted the small marked place on her wrist where Viserys had bitten. "But do not pretend Bravos is innocent. Bravos buys slaves through middlemen and calls it distance." Oro's gaze flicked to the mark, then away. For the first time, a crack appeared in the Bravosi's composure, interest measured and dangerous. Jon Snow spoke to the hall. "Volantis offers trade to those who accept the compact," Jon Snow said. "No slaving, no chance. Paid labor, taxes, governors bound by oath. In return, protection. Roads, fleet escort, dragon garrisons where needed." The Lyseni envoy's smile died. "Lys cannot," he began. Nyrax's head lifted slightly. Smoke curled. The Lyseni envoy swallowed. "Lys will consider," he corrected quickly. The Myrish envoy asked about tariffs, trying to make the conversation small enough to control. Jon Snow answered in numbers and structure, not flattery. Jon Snow offered incentives. Reduced tariffs for cities that dismantled slaver markets, protection against pirates for those who pledged ships. Jon Snow offered punishments. Blockade for those who refused, fire for those who attacked. Oro listened without interruption, eyes bright, hands still. When Jon Snow finished, Oro spoke softly. "Bravos will not kneel," Oro said. "Bravos will prepare." Jon Snow nodded once, accepting honesty as a rare coin. "Then Bravos will be taught," Jon Snow said. "Not today, but soon." Triarch Malco Maegor, pale and exhausted, finally spoke, voice rough. "You will have war with half the world," Triarch Malco Maegor whispered. "You will drown in it." Jon Snow looked at Nyrax and Viserys, at Rena Soren's marked wrist, at the scrolls laid open on the hall's stone table like a blueprint. "Then Jon Snow will build a world that can hold war," Jon Snow said. The envoys left one by one, carrying promises they did not mean and fear they could not hide. Outside, Volantis' streets continued to change. Shops reopening under new rules, river guard patrols enforcing wages, former slaves learning how to walk without looking down. On the hall's dais, Viserys spree. Add small wings and let out a sharp, bright cry that echoed against stone. It sounded like laughter, and somewhere across the sea, Bravos began to sharpen its knives again. The banners changed last. That was how Volantis truly surrendered, when cloth accepted what stone could not deny. For days after the uprising, the old tiger banners still hung from towers out of habit, their stripes snapping in wind that smelled of river and smoke. Freed men looked up at them with bitterness. Tiger-Cloaks looked up at them with nostalgia and shame tangled together. Old blood looked up at them and pretended the cloth meant something. Jon Snow let the pretense linger until the city's bones were set. Bread moved again through markets without whips. Wages were paid from seized vaults, counted by scribes who had once tallied slave sales and now tallied labor. The river guard kept the docks from becoming a feeding frenzy. Rena Soren's watchers mapped every alley and tunnel. Alex Vassar's quiet raids cracked the merchant conspiracies one by one, turning shadow into daylight. Then Jon Snow climbed the black walls at sunset. Nyrax came with Jon Snow, heavy claws scraping stone as the dragon climbed to the parapet like a dark god returning to a throne. Viserys followed on Rhaena Sorin's shoulder, small wings fluttering, copper eyes bright. The sky beyond the wall burned red with the dying sun, and the Rhoyne glittered below, carrying ships like insects. In the harbor, the skeleton of Ashen Law rose on its slipway, ribs of timber waiting for skin. Smaller ships already flew improvised flags. Plain cloth with a simple black dragon painted crude but bold. Captain Sargon Penimian met Jon Snow at the top with a line of Tiger-Cloaks behind him. Their cloaks were still striped, but the stripes looked dull now, as if the city's new heir had leached pride from them. Captain Sargon Penimian bowed stiffly. "The city is quiet," Captain Sargon Penimian reported. "For now, the old blood grumble, but they do not move openly. The slaves..." Captain Sargon Penimian hesitated, then corrected himself with effort. "The freedmen obey your patrols. Your law is holding." "It will hold," Jon Snow said. Rhaena Sorin stepped to the parapet edge and looked out westward where the river met the sea. "The narrow sea is beyond," Rhaena Sorin murmured. "And beyond that, Westeros." Rhaena Sorin's voice held no romance, only calculation. "They won't believe this until they see fire over water." Alex Vassar stood behind them, eyes on Volantis' rooftops below. "Daenor Belloris will hear," Alex Vassar said quietly. "And Maelor Velaryon, wherever he is, will hear too. Men in ruins love a story about a dragonlord. They'll come, either to join or to steal." Jon Snow's burned palm pulsed as if agreeing. "Let them come," Jon Snow said. "The Freehold needs more than enemies to burn. It needs blood to bind." Rhaena Sorin looked at Jon Snow sharply. "Be careful with that," Rhaena Sorin warned. "Old Valyria bound blood until blood strangled it." Jon Snow did not look away from the horizon. "That is why Jon Snow binds law first," Jon Snow said. Below them, men hauled ropes on the wall's central mast. A huge tiger banner came down slowly, folding in on itself like a defeated animal. The fabric fluttered, then sagged as it was lowered to the parapet stones. Freed men watched from the streets below, faces lifted. Some cheered weakly, as if afraid to hope too loudly. Some only stared, mouths tight, tears cutting through soot. A new banner rose. It was black cloth, heavy, plain, with a dragon stitched in red thread. A simple shape, not ornate, but unmistakable. When it caught the wind, it snapped sharp and clean. Volantis, the old heir, now wore a new sigil. Nyrax lifted its head and roared into the sunset. The sound rolled out over the harbor and the river and into the sea beyond, carrying farther than any herald could shout. Viserys answered with a smaller cry, bright and fierce, as if practicing for a roar it would one day own. Jon Snow turned to Captain Sargon Penimian. "Send ships to Pentos," Jon Snow ordered. "Not as beggars, as envoys with terms. They will open their gates and their ledgers, or they will watch their harbor burn." Jon Snow's gaze sharpened. "Send to Lys as well. Tell them their pleasure houses will become barracks if they keep selling bodies." Captain Sargon Penimian's jaw tightened. "And bravos?" Captain Sargon Penimian asked. Jon Snow's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Bravos will get a message," Jon Snow said. "Later, when Ashen Law floats and the second hull is laid." Jon Snow looked out at the sea again, where light bled into darker water. Jon Snow will not rush west before the east is nailed down. Alex Vassar's voice was low. "You speak like you have years," Alex Vassar said. Jon Snow's gaze did not soften. "Jon Snow will take years," Jon Snow said. "The world will not give them freely." Rhaena Sorin rested a hand on the parapet stone and felt the wall's stored heat under her palm. "When you cross to Westeros," Rhaena Sorin said quietly, "they'll call you usurper, they'll call you demon, they'll call you dragonlord and mean it like a curse." Jon Snow looked down at Volantis. The black walls, the river, the shipyards, the streets where freedmen now walked with heads higher. This was only one city, and yet it had already changed the air around it. "Let them," Jon Snow said. Jon Snow is not coming to be loved. Jon Snow lifted the burned palm toward the new banner snapping above them. Jon Snow is coming to be the law they cannot escape. Nyrax's heat pressed at Jon Snow's back like a living cloak. The wind off the river carried salt and smoke and the first hints of sea. Somewhere below, a child laughed, one of Tessario Venn's sons, running along a street without fear of a whip. The sound was small, fragile, worth more than any coin. Jon Snow watched the sun vanish into the horizon and felt the future settle into place like a stone laid in a foundation. Volantis had been the first stone. Now the wall was rising,